Hey everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and of course, that makes this the 1-year anniversary of Circles and Squares, episode 30. We did it, Kate. We've been podcasting for 1 whole year. What an accomplishment. Good for you. Good for us.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's funny. I was thinking about it, obviously, like, in preparation for this show, and I was thinking, I was like, I can't believe it's been a year. Like that feels crazy. Like, I can't believe you guys have been listening for so long. Like, thank you so much. Um, it doesn't feel like a year. It feels like way too long. But then at the same time, like, it also is such a natural part of life now. Like, it would feel weird to not do the podcast
Yeah,
and not be like making notes throughout the week and kind of, always in the back of my mind when I'm playing games. So like it's this weird like juxtaposition of like, oh, it can't be a year, but also like I can't picture not doing it anymore. So
yeah, I totally agree. It's like we were talking the other day, and I just said, like, it's become such a normal part of like my habits now, especially when it comes to like
mhm.
games, right? Like, I'm always sitting down. I've always got my Google Drive open, ready to write like whatever, if something happens during a game or like a note I wanted to make for the show. Like, it's just such a regular part now. It's almost like I couldn't imagine not doing it. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, it's just been a great experience, like you said too. Like, thank you to everyone that's been listening. It feels great to have actually people like follow the show. It's obviously we're not some big time podcast or anything, so it's just it's really encouraging to see that. And thank you all so much for listening, and anyone that's written reviews or subscribed on YouTube, anything like that, like, or even just people that listen for fun and don't do any of that stuff. Thank you guys too. It's been awesome, and we're going to continue to go, obviously, and we'll see what year 2 of Circles and Squares brings. Anyways, we're not going to be doing the news today like we usually do, but I just wanted to shout out at the top of the show. There are 2 new PlayStation 5 controller colors out, Kate. These things are really nice looking.
Yeah, they are both really nice, and I've been holding off getting a second controller because obviously waiting to get some new colors, or sometimes they do those really cool like promotional ones for games, and these both look like contenders for a second controller, I think.
Oh yeah, like especially the black one, I think is like definitely the one I would pick. Not that I don't like the red one, but I mean, come on, the all black, like with the colors on the side of the touchpad, that looks so sleek.
Mm. Black is sleek. The black looks like what we expected would be like the base controller. I think back before the first one was shown off, or we thought that would be an alternate color, like assuming that this console would be black because that's historically been what PlayStation's gone for. So I think the black one is like the perfect like what you'd think of like the old school like typical like PlayStation quintessential controller. Okay, they're calling it red, but like cosmic red, but that's pink.
Cosmic red. It's kind of like maroon, right?
Yeah, I'd say it's
I
more
would say.
pink than red, but I mean, so be it. I think that one's cool. It is a little bit bright, I think, and I tend to kind of like more like simple or less like flashy colors. So I don't know if that might be a little bit too bright for my taste, but I still think it looks awesome.
Yeah, what I like about both of them too is they look like premium products. Like some of the the
Mhm.
DualShock 4 controllers, they're kind of like those plasticky looking material, or like the bright red, bright blue camo kind
Mhm.
of paint jobs and stuff. Whereas these are more like the kind of colors you'd see on cell phones or some like higher end technology. So I
Mhm.
think it adds to the whole like PS5 as a premium product kind of branding.
Yeah. Well, and I think it makes sense. Like you look at the PlayStation 5 controller, like it's a big step up, like just even in, no, obviously it's got all the extra features, but just in terms of like build quality. So
Hmm.
I would expect the other controllers to kind of come out with that same level of standard, but they are cool. I like them. Yeah, I don't know if they'd be like, if I had sat down and said like the color I'm wishing for, I don't know if it's either of these, but I like them.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, very cool stuff. Anyway, just wanted to shout out at the front of the show. One other piece of housekeeping too, and I'm sure it probably won't make that big of a difference for the listeners, but just to get it out there, we are going to be switching podcast hosts. We're currently hosted on Podbean, and it's been a great experience, honestly. But we've kind of come across Anchor, and I know a lot of other shows use Anchor as a hosting platform, and so just because it's free, right? So why not try it out? We're going to be switching over the feed of the show to Anchor, so it shouldn't change anything for the listeners. The only thing is when you're listening to this show, there's potential that some of the older episodes might not be available on the podcast feed just if you wanted to go back and listen to any of the older episodes. It might just take a few days for them to reappear in the feed, but they should be all back up on all the different podcast services we've already been hosted on previously. If something is missing and one of the episodes you can't find it, maybe send us an email, let us know. I'm going to be looking into it, but it should all be good and nothing to worry about there. But just wanted to give everyone a heads up. But Kate, why don't we get into the show here? We got quite a busy show. It's our anniversary episode, like we said before. So we're going to start off. We've actually been playing 2 games together. So we're going to talk about 2 co-op experiences we've had in the past little bit. And then we're going to take a quick break and come back with the second half of the show. We're not going to be doing news today, like we said. And so the last half of the show is going to be another quiz.
Yeah, so we're kind of calling it an anniversary quiz, which is cute but not descriptive. So if you guys remember back, if you've listened or if you haven't, our first episode, we did kind of a get to know us quiz where we answered a bunch of questions about kind of, our gaming history or preferences or just some fun gaming related questions that we thought would be a good way to kind of, have you guys get to know us a little bit and just add a bit of personality to our show. And we really enjoyed it. It was a ton of fun. So what we've done is we've kind of created a sequel to the quiz, if you will. So there's some returning questions we're kind of updating based off of the year that we've had podcasting. So it'll be largely kind of about games we played over the year. There's a PS Plus section we've included because obviously that's been a big part of our show. We've been checking out the PS Plus offerings every month. And then we've also just got some new questions that are just, fun things that we didn't get around to the first time and just, kind of just some more funny stories and preferences and things we like. So
It's going to be a good old time. Going to be good.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm excited to see
we
your
love quizzes
answers.
on the show.
Absolutely.
Yeah, on the first one, it was interesting. We had extremely little overlap. I think we had one question we'd answered with the same game, which I guess is good for diversity, but it was a bit surprising because obviously we have a lot of overlap with our preferences and just games we've enjoyed in the past. So I'm interested to see how different again we'll be.
Yeah, well, we'll find out later. For now, we're going to talk about what we've been playing, and we actually literally just finished playing this game before we recorded, but this is the first game we're talking about is going to be We Were Here Together, and this, of course, is the 3rd game in the series we've kind of been covering on the show. From Total Mayhem Games, again, thank you to them for supplying us with the review codes for the game. This time we played We Were Here Together, which is it's slightly different than the first 2 games, which is We Were Here and then We Were Here 2. And the difference with this one is a lot of the game is spent in the same room together. I guess it says in the title. The previous 2 games they're kind of an escape room series, and we would both be in a separate room and giving clues back and forth, kind of in terms of what you'd find in an escape room. So I have a book with codes, and you have to decipher what it means and then perform an action on your side. But this one was different in the sense that we were actually in the same location for a lot of it and had to kind of interact with puzzles in the same space. So I think we had a good time. Personally, I found this one to be, I think we agreed, we found it to be quite a bit more difficult than the first couple of entries, which I don't know. What did you think overall? I think we had a good time, but definitely way more challenging than before.
Yeah, I agree. I think, first of all, just to kind of do a little housekeeping for it, I think the production quality of this game was a big step up from the last 2. We really enjoyed the other games, but we did mention that there was a few times where we had the game crash or puzzles didn't load quite properly, and it had that little bit of jank. Kind of all the technical issues have been eliminated, so that was really nice to see. But in terms of the actual puzzles, yeah, it's really cool to start together because you're used to, once you get to this part of the series, you're used to being always split up. So that's kind of interesting. But it did kind of change the way that the puzzles played out and the dynamic of it. And I don't know, we're very fresh off of it. We obviously just beat it, but I think in terms of the puzzle design, I actually prefer the predecessors. I think I like that kind of back and forth, a little bit more of having to explain to the other person what you're looking at and kind of relaying information more to each other and solving puzzles that way, versus some of these were kind of complicated because you had slightly more information for what the other person was looking at.
I know, like it's the start of the game for sure. Like
Mhm.
we appeared in the same location, this little cabin, and we were together, so
Mhm.
it was pretty interesting. But then I feel like in terms of balancing, because a lot of the previous games relied on the communication, and so I think they had to maybe limit what they included as far as the puzzles, because you had to be able to relay it over just voice only. Whereas with this game, since we're both looking at the same puzzles and have the same equipment and in the same environment, I think they maybe had
Mhm.
an idea like, hey, let's crank up the difficulty a little bit on these puzzles, because you have two people looking at the same thing. Hypothetically, you should have, two brains are smarter than one. You can figure this out together. And I think sometimes it worked out really well with some of the puzzles, and then other ones, it was almost like we had a little bit too much information and not quite enough direction in terms of like what order we needed to use the things in, or to solve different clues first, and it resulted in a little bit of confusion, I think, even despite being together.
Yes, and it does you do split up for part of the game as well. It kind of does eventually like lead you down some different paths that end up splitting you, and so it sort of goes back a little bit more similar to the first game, but I think it just is a bit grander of a design. So you go into some of the rooms, and normally in the first game you'd go into a room and it would have one puzzle in it, maybe two, and then you would finish that and be on to a new room with new information and a new puzzle, and you kind of very linearly went from like one puzzle to the next puzzle in different environments. Whereas in this game, there were a couple times where you'd go into a room and there would be like 4 or 5 big puzzles in it. And so it was sometimes difficult to know which puzzle to start with, and then also what equipment in the room was for each puzzle. So there was some kind of like almost like organizational issues in terms of like, well, I've got these pipes, and so like, how do they fit into this puzzle? But actually, they're for a puzzle you're supposed to do 2 puzzles in the future, and you have to start with something else. But because you found these pipes, like you're you're immediately trying to figure out what you're supposed to do with them, but actually they don't come into it until later.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the difficulties we ran into, I think, weren't even necessarily in the puzzle solving itself, but just in like knowing what was supposed to interact with what. And I think like that was almost a shame because it sort of like it becomes like it's hard to know exactly what to focus on.
Yeah,
Um,
the puzzles themselves are well designed and they're fun to work out, but it's just that complexity of knowing the order, also the order in which to solve the puzzles in certain situations. Like there was a couple environments that were fairly big rooms and they would contain multiple puzzles, and that's the problem we mostly ran into. I personally think
mhm.
that the second half of the game was maybe stronger than the first half, just because, like you said, in the second half we did get separated a bit more, and it reverted back to almost the same format as the originals, which I personally found were stronger. And even the two that we did today, we did a few. What do we have? 2, 3 different chapters left at the end there. We
Mhm.
completed just before this, and that one we were doing, I kind of had a set of different potions I could combine, and then you had a book with a legend of what their names were. But then I also had a book that had some abbreviations that went along with the legend, and it was just a really fun back and forth in terms of like deciphering which of these potions had which picture on the front and what the abbreviation was, and then you had a flow chart that mapped out the combinations of what we could make by combining them, and it was just a really uh, a fun way to communicate, and an equal amount of back and forth and puzzle solving, and I think that's when the game's really at its strongest.
Yeah, I agree. I think that puzzle in particular was I was going to bring it up as well because I think that might be my favorite puzzle in the entire series.
Hmm.
I think like it had a lot of like steps to it, but each step led you naturally towards the following step. And what seemed really complicated at first actually broke down into a really good back and forth of providing information and eventually leading us to like combine these ingredients, then find the next ingredients, combine them, and eventually to combine like all of the big ingredients we would need to get to the end to create the final potion. And it was just a really good like we might have spent like 40 minutes working on it. Like it wasn't a small puzzle, but because of like the step-by-step nature of it and like the really good back and forth, it felt like we were both contributing a lot. And that every time we figured out one little part of the puzzle, it would naturally lead us to the next, and we were like just steadily progressing. And it was really cool. And yeah, I like the trappings of it too. It was kind of like you're combining these potion ingredients and they've got like kind of funny, like mythical, like pictures on them of like different funguses and like different crabs, and like all the names sounded like Harry Potter spells. And it was just like, it was just really cute trappings on top of what was a really good, like, cooperative puzzle. So I think this game definitely had moments where it shined, and I think overall I really enjoyed it. But I think, like you said, the second half where you're split up is just a little bit stronger, and I think that that's kind of where they excel at their puzzle solving, which makes sense because it's more similar to their first two games that they've already kind of gotten a lot of experience with. And then in the second game, they sort of tried something a little bit different at first, which I still enjoyed, but I think, like you said, the strength of it is when you're split up and having to really like communicate to each other what's in your room, what you've got available, and you solve the puzzle based off of both coming to it with 50% of the problem.
Yeah, because I know when we were talking about We Were Here Too last time, one of our bigger complaints with that one, I mean, bigger complaint is within a game that we still overall enjoyed, but it was that some of the puzzles were very much more heavily in favor of a certain player. Like, you would have a lot more information, and I had a few times to, like, I was pretty much standing around waiting for you to figure something out before I could really interact. And I would actually say that's one of the strengths of this game overall, is that I felt in the vast majority of the puzzles, even if it was something that was maybe a bit heavier on your side, that I still had things I was doing, and vice versa. There wasn't too many times when I felt like one person really had to dominate a certain puzzle for the other person, which is something that I really appreciated. The other thing I was going to bring up too was this game actually has quite it's way more story focused than the other ones, I would say. And I think we were trying to figure this out the whole time we were playing, because I mean, the other two games had some story moments as well, but we were overall pretty confused in terms of what exactly the narrative was. Like, we're pretty much, all we understood was, we were in this mountain and it's all snowy, and we found a castle, and now we're trapped there and have to try and escape. And this game took that a bit further in terms of, like, the start of the game, you're getting this radio signal and you're trying to figure out where it's coming from so you can both head off and save whoever's trapped. And we eventually make it to a castle again and go all the way through. But the story kind of has this grandiose type of finish where there's some, some of the story moments were actually kind of cool in a way, but I felt kind of lost as to who the people were or what they were trying to accomplish. And I don't know what, I feel like maybe you had the same opinion as me, but I almost wish it was a bit clearer with the story wise, or they would have maybe just went with a design of like, hey, we have some pretty strong puzzle design, so why don't we just kind of scrap trying to make a narrative around the game and focus on just creating some really solid puzzles and expanding the game out that way, because the mechanics and the puzzle solving really are where the game shines, not so much in the narrative aspect. At least that's what I took away.
I think so. I think it was like kind of neat because it's sort of like a mystery you're following along, and but I agree. I think we're a little lost. I think part of it too is maybe some user error, because we realized partway through that when we would get a cutscene between puzzles, once we were split up, we were not watching the same cutscene, which I think is actually really cool because it really fits that the narrative and like the philosophy of the game of like you're both bringing 50% of it. So I think like we were supposed to be like, well, I just saw this in my cutscene, I just saw this, and you bring that together and try to figure out what the story is together, and it's almost like the story is another puzzle, which is cool. Deep. But but I think the problem is we didn't realize until maybe like the third cutscene that we were actually looking at different cutscenes.
No, well, it's funny because one of the cutscenes I had, I think I was like, oh, did you just see that? And you said yes, like as if. I mean, you must have seen something similar from a different angle.
Because I was looking at something else. And so, yeah, by the time we realized that, we were already a couple cutscenes deep. So, like, I didn't really know what was happening so much in yours. You didn't really know what was happening so much in mine. And I think maybe, like, we could have spent a little bit more time kind of trying to unravel that together, and we just didn't really engage with it so much. So I think it's a really cool idea, and maybe it plays a little bit better if you put in a little more effort towards it. But I think by the time we're like, oh shit, we haven't been watching the same cutscene, we were kind of just like, oh whatever, this story's weird, let's play the puzzles.
One thing it does add too, though, is like the potential, if you were really interested and you did want to go back to play the game again in the future, you might want to take the different paths to get the different cutscenes and then maybe piece it together that way too.
Yeah, that's true. There's also that replay value, which is kind of nice. But I don't I kind of like the idea of like, like you bring your 50% in all aspects of it, including the story. So
True.
I think that's like I feel like that's an intentional and really cool design. It's a shame that we didn't notice right away, and maybe like there might have been some indication earlier, or maybe we're just really dumb and we missed it.
Yeah, maybe it's a combination of both. Who knows? The other
Mhm.
thing I liked about this game a lot too, in terms of like you mentioned how much it has a smoother kind of feel to it. Like it runs a lot better,
Mhm.
less technical issues. They also added something which I really appreciated, like quality of life wise, which was that we could actually hold multiple items in our inventory this time too. Because
Mhm.
in the previous games, there was a couple puzzles where you'd have like several books in a room, and you'd be using them to gather clues, and you'd be kind of having to run around and look at different books all over and over again. Whereas in this game you can hold multiple things, and that really helped a lot with many of the puzzles. Because for example, there was one time I was in a greenhouse and having to put some plant seeds in some pots and grow different plants to make potions out of. And the fact that I could hold all the bags of seeds at once and just kind of scroll through it quickly and pick the one I wanted and plant it saved me so much time compared to what may have happened in previous games when I'd have to run across the room, pick up seeds, plant them, run back, pick up some more, plant them. So it was just a really nice quality of life that sped up quite a few of the puzzles where I could have seen some, not backtracking, but a little bit extra running around that would have made the puzzles a little bit more elongated, especially when you're confused already a little bit and trying to still sort it out. So it was just really nice to see that, and a good evolution of what the previous games had.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this game just has a lot of like really nice quality of life, and just even things like there's a button to skip the cutscenes, and it was really good at tracking where we were in terms of chapters if we had taken a break. And it also lets you like swap roles at any time, which is nice. So if you could even do that, I guess, if you were stuck on a puzzle, or if you just kind of want to try a little bit of a different perspective, you can swap. Once you're split up, you can swap and be like, I'm taking the player one role, or I'm taking the player two role. So like there was a lot of like more conveniences, I guess, added in, which I think are nice. And it had a bit more of a robust like settings menu and that kind of stuff. So it just felt like a bit more of a a polished
It was just,
product,
yeah,
I
polished
guess.
product, 100%, 100%.
But yeah, I think overall we're really big fans of the series, and I know that Total Mayhem's working on another puzzle game in the same series. So I think I'm definitely looking forward to that. Overall, a much more positive experience with the series, and I think they're really unique and creative puzzle games, and not just puzzle but also like co-op games. I have never really played anything that does co-op quite in the same way, and I'm really excited about the next game coming out because I think they're just going to even expand on it more.
Yeah, I'm there, right there with you. I think we had a great time playing the series overall. I mean, despite some of the minor technical issues and whatever, and we had a really good time. And I think it's a really fun game to play with someone, especially if you want to put your thinking cap on a little bit with some of the puzzles and kind of work together and have that really satisfying feeling of solving some difficult stuff. I would definitely
Hmm.
say, like, if you want to give it a try, I would go in with the idea that set yourself a time limit, 30 minutes on each puzzle if you want, and just don't be afraid to look up some hints even if you want to, because I know there were some puzzles in this game where we were just like, holy crap, like how do we do this, and I think we really improved our
Yeah.
experience by being okay with looking up a clue here or there on a couple of the puzzles, just straight up looking up how to solve it and move along with the game, because there's a lot of good stuff to see. And if you kind of got stuck and let yourself get a bit frustrated and maybe turn it off and don't come back, I think you're really missing out on what is a really fun experience.
I agree, and I think yeah, I don't think there's any shame in looking it up. Like don't let it get tedious. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, like we're here to have a good time, and if that means that we speed it along a little bit, so be it. I think yeah, this game I think I would say we thought was the hardest. Um, so I'd say maybe play the other ones and kind of work up to this one.
And pay attention to the cutscenes in the first couple, because the story pays off in the end.
Yeah, exactly. There's sometimes some big decisions to make in these games, so
Oh yeah.
it really test the bond between both players.
Well, we succeeded, Kate. We did it. We overcame it,
Mhm.
and we're stronger for it. So there you go. That's We Were Here Together. And the other game we've been playing is a blast from the past. We're calling back to 2000, I think it was, right? Year 2000.
Yes, I
Uh,
believe so.
we've decided to take the time and sit down and play one of our childhood favorites Crash Bash, everyone's favorite PlayStation party game in the vein of Mario Party. And man, this has been such a nostalgic experience to sit down a couple times and play this with you. It's like totally bring me back to being like 8, 9, 10 years old, whatever it was, and having a really good time. This game is, I will say, way harder than I remember it being, though. Holy shit. Like
Yeah,
some
oh
of the
my
challenges
god.
are nuts. But overall, like I mean, if you've had even close to as good of a time as I have with some of the like remembering some of the challenges and just seeing these PS1 graphics again from way back in the day, like man, it really is a cool experience. And I think overall the game is still quite a lot of fun, as long as you're okay with like, holy shit, like how are we ever gonna beat this? And then you kind of fluke out some of the challenges here and there, but um
Yeah, 100%. It's got a little bit of that old school kind of jank to it where like sometimes you just get dicked. Like there's no way to
yeah.
do the you know to win, like you got unlucky and you got to try again. And it's one of those things where like I didn't realize how tough the game was cuz as a kid like each mini game only takes like, a couple minutes at most to play. So as a kid, you're just like, oh, I lost, try it again. And you can run it 30 times and it doesn't matter because, you're young, time means nothing. And like,
You have nothing to
you're just
do,
having a
yeah.
good, yeah, you're just having a good time playing. Whereas as an adult, you're playing and you're like, oh my God, like, I can't believe we're having to try this like 15 times. Like this is so hard just
Like
because your perspective has changed.
I only had 2
Uh,
hours to hang out, and I like, damn,
yeah,
we spent
exactly.
45 minutes playing ballistics. And like, fuck.
Exactly. But I still think it's super fun. Like there's some games I think are better than others.
So
Yeah.
Crash Bash is a party game, Mario Party style, but instead of having boards, it kind of has a few different modes. You have the regular battle mode where you can kind of just play multiplayer, pick the games you unlock, pick the ones you like, and just fool around. There's also a tournament mode where you just play through a series of mini games and see who turns out the best. But the real reason to play Crash Bash is the story mode. Of course, it's cooperative, so we did 2-player story mode. Classic good versus evil. Pick a character, and you go into a series of, they call them warp rooms, which is basically a set
Like
of
a
mini
little
games
hub
in a certain
area, I
room, hub
guess.
area. Yeah, and you have to beat each mini game in the room to eventually fight the boss and then move to the next warp room. And every room has a similar set of games, but the games all have new kind of parameters on them. And then there's also new games introduced every warp room you move up. So the classic games, just to run through, and we have Ballistics, which is the pinball looking game. Polar Push, which is you're on the back of polar bears trying to push each other off an iceberg. Pogo Pandemonium, which is how would you even describe that game? It's like you're on a grid kind of, and you're painting the grid in your own
Yeah.
color after your pogo stick.
Yeah, you kind of like hop around on this grid board and whenever you go to a space it puts your color on it and you have to score points based off of like having the largest section of the grid be colored your own color.
Right.
I
Okay.
guess it's kind of like really old precursor not FPS Splatoon, which is it's not helpful at all.
100%.
But
That's a great description.
yeah,
It's like Splatoon crossed with Connect 4. Let's say it like that.
yeah, there you
Yeah.
go. A
We also
match
have
made in heaven.
Tank Wars, which is driving tanks around trying to shoot each other. I guess if you want to put it basically. Then there's Crate Crush, which is throwing boxes at each other, similar to like dodgeball, I guess, in a
Yeah, it's
weird
kind of
way.
like a brawl sort of. Dodgeball's kind of good. Yeah, you sort of
Yeah,
like you're picking up objects and throwing them at each other and trying to like, you know,
yeah,
get health down as fast as possible.
right. Then the last two games are Crash Dash, which is kind of a race. It's a circular little track, and the controls are really difficult and very sensitive. And then finally, the last game is called Medieval Mayhem, which is basically collecting floating balloons that are the right color for your team, and you're on a kind of rotating platform. So those are the base games, and then every time you play a different version, there's different parameters and different kind of twists on it that they put to add a bit of variety. So I think I think you mentioned before, some of these games, looking back on them now, are much stronger than other ones. Like certain ones we would be
Hmm.
very much looking forward to playing, like the pinball with the ballistics is, I think, both of our favorites, and that one's really fun.
Hmm.
I think we both generally enjoy like a lot of the crate games as well, and the polar
Hmm.
push
The
is
polar
fun.
bear is good. Yeah.
But I mean, some of the other games, especially when it's combined with the difficulty for some of the challenges, are I mean, I don't look forward to playing like Crash Dash, the racing game, at all. That
No,
game
the
is,
racing game is terrible, which is funny because I know like there's actually that Team Nitro or whatever, their racing game
Oh,
is like
CTR, yeah.
considered, yeah, CTR is considered like one of the best racing games. This is not similar to CTR at all. Like this is some dinky little like circular track that feels awful to play. Like this is not like, don't think of like an actual like racing course you're going on. This is like just the shitty mini game version of it. So we're not bashing CTR. This is totally different and it is awful.
Oh yeah, it's yeah. I think this game definitely has, like you said, that old school kind of challenge though. Like especially with games like the Crash Dash, like it's almost became kind of luck if you won or not. And there was, especially when you move up to the second version of that, where there's all the kind of poison on the ground, and you get these bumpers where you can push each other off the track, and there's no walls, so you're pretty much just racing around trying to go as fast as you can, and sometimes you just get caught in these loops of like, okay, I got knocked up in the sky by running into this barrel, and then I hit this poison, and then this enemy came by and hit me with the bumper, and I fell into the acid on the ground, and then I respawned and then got bumped off the track again, and now I'm 2 laps behind and I have no way to catch up, and it's just kind of like you may as well phone it in.
Well, and the other thing too is like the way that the NPCs scale, because you play 2v2, like we're on a team and then there's 2 enemies we're trying to beat. And there's usually like for each warp room you go up, it increases in difficulty. The AI gets a little bit smarter, a little bit better at the game. And so they start off being like absolute morons, and then they get to be like quite proficient at the game. But the problem is that if you're on your best game and they're on their best game, they're probably going to win by the end. So like you kind of need to hit that correct balance of like you're having a good game, but they also like got messed up by something. And so like that might just take 5 games to hit that balance, and then you're successful. So
Mm-hmm.
I think we ended up specifically with the racing game at one point. You're better at the racing game than I am. And Koala Kong was for some reason so good at it. Like the other guy on their team was terrible. He wasn't a threat at all, Dingo Dial. But
Right,
Koala
right.
Kong was such like a
He was a
shark at this
menace.
racing game. He could not be stopped. So I was like, okay, only one of us needs to come first in the race. So I think you did your best at just race well, and I spent my whole game like just trying to mess up Koala Kong because I knew he was the competition. So I think at the end you have to go around the track 8 times or something. I think I went around twice by the end because I just like parked myself in the way of Koala Kong.
That was my
And
favorite
like,
thing, yeah.
yeah, and that was the best strategy for winning like the high level of that game. But there's other games where you can't really like work together and you just sort of like got to do your best, and so those I guess maybe end up being a little bit more fun. But
Yeah, I was gonna say
you,
it's an
you
interesting balance of difficulty too, because when you play the games for the first time, you have to earn the trophy for that game. So you have to win a best of 3 against the opponent, which sometimes can be really tough because, especially on the later warp rooms when the enemies get to be a higher level of competency, you really need to play well, and you need to win this best of 3. And if you lose like 3-2 or 3-1 or something, you've got to replay like several rounds of this game over and over, and it gets pretty tough. After you beat the certain mini game and get the trophy, you can replay it again for either gems or crystals, which are like another thing you can earn by playing an augmented version of the same game. So for example, in the pinball game, you can do this thing called a push, which is as the ball's coming towards your side of the net, you can kind of force it back out with you can kind of propel it stronger. And in the
yeah, and
gem round, oh sorry,
maybe
go
we
ahead.
should just
Yeah,
explain the pinball a little bit just to get like a
sure.
picture of it. So it's kind of like you're on a board with 4 sides, and your side is like a net, and you're in this kind of like pinball car. You're in this like hover car, I guess, and these like metallic pinballs roll out, and you have to like hit them and stop them from going in your net. And it's kind of like it kind of almost plays more like air hockey than pinball. We just call it pinball because that's what like the
It's called
aesthetic is.
ballistics. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the aesthetic, but it's basically 4-sided air hockey, and you have to hit the ball into the other person's net and stop them from going in your net. And whoever you get, like, like 20 life or something every time a ball goes in, you lose one, and whoever's the last man standing wins the round. So, yes, then you get that push, which kind of propels the balls faster. So, not only does it make it better to score on your opponent, but it also like can kind of like scoop a little bit from the side of you so it makes you like have a little bit bigger of a presence in your net.
Makes it a lot easier to defend, that's for sure. Like
Yes.
it's even more useful for defense than it is for attacking, really. And I don't
Yes.
think you really notice that until you play the challenge where you get that taken away. And
But
that is
your
just
enemies still have
so hard.
it.
Yeah, it just became a
Yeah.
whole nother level of difficulty. And what I was gonna say was at least I was kind of two minds, because as hard as that challenge is, the gems and the relics you only have to beat one time and you just win the award. You don't have to do a best of
Mhm.
3. So even though it's more difficult, I feel like sometimes you could complete those quicker because you just could fluke out a win if they happen to play like shit one round, and then you win. So that's the only thing that kind of saves some of those from being nearly impossible.
Mhm. Or some of them too will be like, there's stuff like that where you kind of have like a negative condition, or there'll be things like, you just have like 10 less life than they do, so you got to be a little bit more perfect. Or on some of the other games it's like, well, there's a time limit, and if you don't win within the time limit, you lose. So like those are pretty quick to run back, like especially on the polar bear, because you're kind of on this like floating icy platform, and you're riding polar bears and you're trying to push the other people off. So like, normally you have like a minute and 30 seconds to push the other guys off, but now you only have 30 seconds. So it's like, well, it's hard to do, but you can run that 10 times in a row. It only takes 30 seconds each time. So
Exactly.
like those go by pretty quick, but they are quite challenging.
So
And some,
gonna say, so I have a fun fact about Crash Bash for you, actually,
uh-huh.
which I didn't know if you knew this, but I was doing a little bit of research, just more or less to get the real names of these games for the show, because I
Hmm.
mean I didn't know pinball was called ballistics. It
No,
doesn't
we've
ever
always
tell
just
you
called
that
it
really.
pinball.
But anyway, so Rillaroo, did you have any idea that Crash Bash was his first ever appearance in any game?
Oh,
He was created for Crash Bash, and he never showed up again in any Crash game until the new CTR game, which was released a few years
huh.
ago, and they put him in as a character. But that was his first and only appearance up until that point. I had no idea.
Hmm.
I thought he was definitely an enemy from one of the Crash games I hadn't played. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
assume so, because as kids, that like we played some of the other Crash games, Crash 3, I think specifically, but we never really like had or owned many other Crash games. Like this was kind of our definitive Crash game growing up as kids. So
yeah,
yeah, I just assumed because it was kind of a weird spin-off that like all of the stuff was just pulled from other games.
that's what I thought too. I don't know, but because I mean, like N is in one of the games, and I think he's the final boss as well. Actually, that's another thing I realized by kind of looking this up, is I don't think we ever actually made it all the way to the real final end of the game, because I looked up some footage and I had seen the final boss fight before. The boss fights are all just different versions of the same mini games again, but he's in the final boss, and then after you beat him, there's actually a fifth warp room of games which you can unlock after going back and earning a few more kind of, I think they're called relics they have. So there's a lot more to this game than I ever knew as a kid. Which I'm kind of surprised by, because I remember playing this pretty extensively. So maybe we'll have to
I think
push on
so.
and
I think we got 100% the game. I think that's gonna be our gaming challenge for the next couple months.
oh god.
It's gonna be tough, but like I really feel like I owe it to myself to do it. But yeah, I think like when you're kids, and I think I had this a lot, especially with a lot of like RPGs and stuff, is like you play them for a while and then you kind of like fall off, start playing other things, and then when you play again, you just restart. So I feel like the amount of time we've put into this game, we could have beaten it like 3 or 4 times over, but we just would keep restarting and just playing the games that we liked. So I think like, partially that's why we'd be like, oh, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to play without you. So like, I'm going to start my own save file, because like that save file is for when we play together.
Yeah,
And
right.
then, like, but we don't play for a week, and then we play again. It's like, okay, let's just start a new one. And so like,
Yeah, well,
I had that with
especially
a
if it's
lot of
like,
games. Like we talked about Final Fantasy Advanced Tactics so many times, and like the amount of hours I put into that as a kid, but I never beat it. I beat it like as an adult, like 5 years ago, because I was like, oh, how the hell have I like never beaten this game? I should do it.
yeah, how
And
do I have
so,
300 hours in this, but I've only ever beaten the
yeah,
first 2 chapters or something?
exactly. It's because I'd play half of it, stop playing for 3 months, start it again, be like, oh, I kind of don't know 100% where I was. I'll just restart.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
like, you've got the patience to do that as a kid. So,
true. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I'm really happy we went back and played this. It's funny, when we did our top 50 games of all time, our top 25 games of all time, I remember Crash Bash was on my list, my short list. It didn't actually make it, but it was on the list. And I've
mhm.
done a top 50 games like personally for myself, just to have that kind of, I like to track stuff like that. I'm kind of crazy, but I remember Crash Bash, I think, was the 50th game on my list. And I
Nice.
put
It
it
did
there
make
because
it.
I went back a couple years ago and I did play a bit of this with a friend of mine. And I think I don't know if it would still be on my list. And I don't know if it's a combination of I've played some stuff since that I think would kick off the last few games anyway. But I mean, for as
Mhm.
much as I enjoyed this, I think I'm enjoying playing it because it's really nostalgic to go back and sit down with you
Yeah.
and go back through the game. I'm not sure that the game itself still is this excellent party game that I'm remembering.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think nostalgia does play a portion of it. I think it's still fun, but I think
Yeah,
some of the challenge kind of like takes away from it and being like, "Oh God, fuck, I just want to beat this level so we can go to the next one."
yeah, totally.
Um, and I've got an interesting question. So, since this is kind of a party game, I'm just making a comparison in my mind. Would you say what do you think, Crash Bash or Mario Party, if you had to pick one of the series?
Well, I mean that's unfair, right? Because Mario Party has so many iterations, and I
Right.
think that had a lot more variety over the years. I think Crash
Okay.
Bash is, if you want to compare it to like say Mario Party 2 or 3 or something from that same
Yeah.
time era.
Like your first Mario Party and Crash Bash.
Yeah, I think that Crash Bash maybe has some higher highs, and the games are a little bit more. And let's say the caveat that if we happen to have like a multi tap and happen to sit down and play with four human opponents that aren't these computers that can kind of predict everything you do, because the CPU is like way harder in this than any Mario Party game, without a doubt. So
Mhm.
so I think that in a situation where you're playing with four friends, this game has maybe some of the strongest mini games, and they're definitely more skill based than a lot of the Mario Party ones. So I think there's a place for this game as being a little bit more of a competitive yet still kind of goofy fun type of night for some friends. And I really like the way this has a story mode, which is you can play through like cooperatively with two people. But I think if you're
Mhm.
wanting to sit down and just have more of a casual experience, and maybe you only have three people, so you need one CPU, and I mean, I think maybe Mario Party's stronger there. And the other thing that Mario Party has over this is, at the end of the day, I think that Mario Party being shaped as a board game and kind of rolling the dice and seeing what space you land
Mhm.
on is a really fun experience. And I think overall, I do prefer it a little bit to this. But I'm curious
Yeah.
to see what you say about that too.
I kind of mostly agree. I think Mario Party is just more of a complete package. I think that board game element kind of adds something, whereas in this game, like the warp rooms are very bare. It's just basically like a menu you can walk around in to get to the next game. It doesn't really have any gameplay of its own accord. So I think it's just missing an aspect that Mario Party has. And I think while the games in Crash are like developed a bit more and there's a little bit more skill to them, it's cool to see the variations of each game because, there's like five or so versions of each one. Mario Party just has so much more variety in terms of the mini games. And I think I would pick that variety over the games maybe
Mm-hmm.
being
Mm-hmm.
having a little bit more depth. I think if maybe all of the games in Crash were as quality as the pinball, which is the clear favorite of ours, then maybe it'd be different. But like a couple of them are really like whatever. So you only really have like three great games, four okay, like one's okay, like two are pretty meh. So like
Yeah.
you're very limited in games of like which ones I'd want to play a lot versus Mario Party is like, well, maybe none of the games like stand out as being amazing on their own, but there's like 30 really good ones.
Well, that's the
And
thing too.
so,
Like, yeah, this game doesn't have the variety that Mario Party has. Like, I think every Mario
yeah,
Party game must have what 40 or 50 mini games. It feels like. Whereas in this,
yeah,
you could kind of sit down with your friends
exactly.
and play through all of them within the span of an hour if you really wanted to get what you wanted out of it. So yeah, I mean, this is
Exactly.
a fun
So,
game. I would love to see a modern take on Crash Bash.
yeah, 100%. I think Crash is neat and I would love to see like, it's been 21 years. I'd love to see a new one come out and see what they can do with it. Because the formula is really interesting. I like the co-op part. The bosses are really cool. That's something Mario Party doesn't have. But the boss fights being a little bit more special versions of the game are actually pretty fun. Um, and they're exciting, but I think overall I would pick the variety of Mario Party. It's just a little bit more, I think, fun to sit down and like goof around with your friends. And I think that like casual hanging out with my friends aspect to me is a little bit stronger than the like oh, the challenge. I want to get good at, pogo
Hmm.
stick
Hmm.
game.
Yeah,
So
yeah. To the extent
I'd
you
go
can
with
even get
Mario
good. Yeah,
Party over the
yeah.
two, but I would like to see a new Crash Bash. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I totally agree. I hope we do one day. Let's see. Let's hope that us
Mhm.
talking about it on this show sparks some interest about Crash Bash and kind of brings it back into the public perception. And eventually, one
That's
day,
right.
we are granted with,
Cra-
the blessing.
Crash is a phoenix right now. It's being reborn from the ashes. So maybe Crash Bash is the next place it gets to go.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. But in any case, Kate, I think unless you have any more points about Crash Bash to make, that's actually going to do us for what we've been playing this week. So don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back in just a moment's time with our fun quiz. All right, everyone, welcome back to the show for the second and final part of the show for today, where we're going to be going back through I guess it's like a get to know us quiz, except now you know us, so now you can just enjoy our answers and have some fun. So I guess without further ado, let's just jump right into the first question, which is a returning question from the quiz the previous time, which is, what is our most anticipated game that's not yet out? So it's kind of funny just to go back over our original answers for this question, because you had said that your most anticipated game was Elden Ring, which I kind of have a suspicion your answer has not changed between now.
um, I'm still right there, looking forward to it. In the spirit of this quiz, I have chosen another answer.
Okay, just to check though, like, what is your hype on Elden Ring right now? How are you feeling? Because I mean, we've not had much positive news at all about this game coming
Well, we
out.
haven't had any negative news either. It's just it's been some radio silence. But you know what? I think that's fine. They're not ready to show anything off yet. I know a lot of people are upset, and maybe there's an argument to be made for, like, just put out some communication. Like, even if it's just a sorry guys, it's hard
That's
to
it.
make a
Sorry,
video. It's
guys.
hard to make a video game. Please be patient. We appreciate you're excited. And you know what? Maybe that would make people feel better. But it's one of those things where, like, it'll come out when it comes out, and so be it. I'd rather wait 15 years and have the best version of Elden Ring possible
Absolutely, yeah,
versus, you
absolutely.
know, spoilers for your answer getting rushed to
Oh God.
to
Well,
come out. So,
that's the other funny
yeah.
part of this too. Is my previous answer was Cyberpunk, which at the time, thinking back in May 2020, there was no reason not to be insanely hyped for Cyberpunk coming off of The Witcher 3, and it just looked like, from what we had seen at that time with the few videos we got to be shown, like, that game looked amazing. And
Mhm.
now fast forward to now, May 2021, and like, oh boy, I couldn't be any less interested in checking that out. So man, that didn't age well either.
No, it did not. So yeah, I kind of, I thought this was a cute question to go back to, but I also just really like to poke a little fun of us for our answers, because
100%.
you never, looking forward, you don't really know quite what you're supposed to expect. So we did pick that. So I mean, Elden Ring is still an answer for me, but I've what's funny is I think I might have also brought up Silk Song at the time, which is the Hollow Knight
Hmm.
sequel, and
Hmm.
that's kind of been the same thing. It was supposed to, come out sometime 2020, and it's just been a bit silent on that front as well. So, well, those are definitely the two games I'm kind of most looking forward to. I've actually decided to pick a game that has a specific release date and is likely to come out in the near future. Or at all. So I'm going to update mine to say that I'm really looking forward to Kenna Bridge of Spirits, which is set to come out on the 24th of August.
Good answer.
I think this game, like, it's just really stands out. I think the visuals look great. The story looks kind of like, it almost reminds me of like a Pixar movie, like a really uplifting, just really like wholesome, pleasant world to live in. And the gameplay looks really fun too. And I think it just looks like it's going to be a really cool PlayStation 4 experience. I think it looks like it's just going to run really beautifully and just be like a really wholesome game world to be in for a while. So I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't think there's any like one particular thing that really stands out about it, but it's really just sort of caught my eye and I'm looking forward to it.
I'm with you. That game looks awesome. It's not what I wrote for my answer, but I'm definitely hyped for it. Well, I had a couple different answers for this. I wrote Rift Apart, but I kind of feel bad putting that just because it's so imminent. So I'm not going to
Yes.
put that as my answer for this. I was thinking more long term, and so the answer I settled on is pretty clear. It's God of War Ragnarok, man. Like
Yes, of
I love
course.
God of War 2018 so much. It's low hanging fruit. Like who's got a PS5 that's not excited to play Ragnarok when it comes out? But it really
Mhm.
is my answer. Like 2018 God of War is right up there with my favorite games ever, and I mean I have no reason to think that they won't improve on it or at least deliver something that's similar with Ragnarok. So yeah, I'm just excited to
Yeah.
see where that story goes and kind of the lore around it and everything. So yeah,
A
Ragnarok for me.
100%. I could not be more excited for Ragnarok. And I think that's probably one of the kings on my list too. But I kind of put it in that like, well, it doesn't have a proper release date yet. Maybe I'm gonna go for something a little bit more direct in the future. But yeah, Ragnarok, I cannot wait. That'll be a day one purchase, I think.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt.
Hmm.
So question two, let's get to the next one, which is our new greatest gaming achievement. Last time you had said that your achievement was being amazing at Bloodborne, and mine was that I
Hmm.
beat Contra without the Konami code, and also I shouted out that I'd won 5 games of Fortnite in a row.
Which is amazing. I bet
Which
you haven't done that since.
oh god, nowhere even close. I've definitely played a lot less Fortnite since then too, like around that time. But man, I remember,
Hmm.
yeah, we just had that crazy night, like me and a couple of friends, where we couldn't be stopped. We were
Hmm.
out for blood that night in Fortnite. But yeah, I'm curious to see what yours is now because
You can play a little sad violin for me here because I had a hard time coming up with something.
so
I
did
hadn't
I.
really achieved much in the last year in terms of gaming. Like I beat Sekiro, that's really cool. It's considered a hard game and whatnot. But like I don't really feel like I had like a cool achievement. So I've kind of extended the boundaries of these answers, and I've actually got a board game achievement that I was
Ooh,
quite proud of. And it's kind of a funny little story. So we play this game called Gloomhaven. It's wonderful.
love it.
Um, I highly recommend anyone who even has the slightest interest in board games or like tabletop campaign kind of things to sit down and take a look at this. But basically, it's a co-op game. You all pick different characters who have like unique mechanics and backstories and races and stuff, and you play co-op together to go through scenarios. And there's an overarching story, and I won't get super into it. But the point is that yeah, it's co-op, but each character has their own what's called a solo scenario, and it's a session that you play that is based around each character. And instead of playing with your whole party, you play just by yourself.
Oh, that's
And
cool. I didn't know that.
they're designed to kind of take advantage of, the strengths and weaknesses that each individual character brings to the table. So you have to do some certain things within the main game to unlock these. So spoilers, James. That's why you haven't seen him yet.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We haven't gotten quite as far as the other guys I've been playing with. But we had I got mine kind of unlocked at around the same time that one of the other guys in my group that I play with, he also had one to do. So what we decided we were gonna do is that we were actually gonna sit down and have a race to see who could do theirs first.
Ooh, that's cool.
And so what we did is the other two people that I play with often, they were kind of like, we called them like our pit crew, and they were gonna help us like do the admin sort of stuff. Like, okay, we did an attack, so they're gonna set the enemy's health for us properly, and like, help with kind of like the things that might kind of slow you down a little bit as you play. So we went into it. I'm like, oh, okay, this is gonna be tough. Like, the other character was like, the other guy playing had like a really strong character who's like a little bit better on their own than my character. So went into it a little bit like nervous of how well I do, but also like it's one of those dumb things that it's fun to get really competitive about. So we started, and I didn't cheat on it, but some something I'd had with my character with a certain item kind of like negated part of the difficulty of mine. So I ended up just breezing through it in like 10, 15 minutes or something. And he like wasn't even halfway done his. I just absolutely destroyed him in the race. And so it ended up just
What an
being like
achievement.
it ended up just being like a stupid, funny thing we did. And so I'm now the official race winner of Gloomhaven.
Oh, congratulations. That is an achievement
Thank
if I've
you.
ever heard one
Yes.
before.
Yes, it was very wonderful. So I'm hoping to rematch at some point. But that was kind of my biggest like I did it moment.
Nice. Congratulations. My
Thank you, thank
achievement,
you.
I don't think is maybe quite as impressive as my previous one of the Konami code with Contra, because that's legitimately hard,
That's
like,
huge.
damn.
That is
But
a big achievement.
yeah. So this one, I mean, mine, the only one I could think of between like, and we should say like these answers we're giving for now are all things we've done between the start of the podcast to now. So in the
Yeah.
last year, I was really trying to rack my brain, and I don't know if it's maybe the toughest thing I've done, but the thing I'm most proud of is I got the Persona 5 Royal Platinum trophy. Uh, for my PlayStation collection. Like I not that, I mean, we've said it a million times, we're not, both of us aren't super into trophies, but just having the platinum for my favorite game, really cool
Mhm.
feeling. It lets me know, you know, I kind of did pretty much everything there is to do in the Royal, which I've also talked a bunch about on the show, so I'll keep it short. But just having the platinum for that game, it's nice to see. And whenever I log onto my PS4, it's actually the last game I played on my PS4 because of
Okay.
you know, I play everything on PS5 now, but because it's disc based and I have the digital PS5, I had to still complete it on the PS4. So along the top, it
Mhm.
shows like the most recent trophy you've earned, and it pops across with the platinum there. So that's kind of cool.
Mhm. Okay,
But
that is cool.
not
I like
terribly
that.
hard though.
So
Not terribly hard.
that's okay. Doing just that little like achievements or goals for yourself. It's good to get through things. Okay, we'll go on to the third question, which is our second last returning question. And so, in the first one, we went over and we both gave 4 franchises or games that kind of shaped our gaming preferences or had a really big, profound impact on us. And so, I had said that I'd just quickly go over our answers. I had given the From Software's Souls series, including Sekiro, so all their games, the Mario franchise, League of Legends, and the Banner Saga franchise. And you'd given Pokemon, Persona, Phoenix Wright, and Super Smash Bros. And we thought it'd be fun to kind of update this list and give an additional franchise or game that we felt has been really influential, but something again that we've played within this last year.
Hmm. Yeah. So I
Uh,
guess I'll answer first this time, and I'll say
mhm,
that as I was looking back through what I'd played this year, I think that there's nothing I've played more of than Apex Legends, and I think
mhm,
that's my answer for this as well, because as I played more and more, I think I've just realized, like, when it comes to first person games, and the ones I'd played before, like on my list, Pokemon, Persona, Phoenix, right? Like they're all kind of turn based or
mhm,
RPGs, and for the most part, then Smash Bros is its own thing. But Apex to me is everything I'm looking for in terms of the way I want a first person game to feel. Just running around, and the maneuverability, and the way that the characters have a lot of different abilities, whether it's movement based or some of them can scan where guys are, and or shoot different missiles. Like there's a bunch of different things you can do, but when you boil it down to just the straight up mechanics of what it feels like to look around, what do the guns feel like, the way you can
mhm,
slide down hills and kind of gain momentum, or go up the zip lines and get to different heights on the map. The way that it all comes together is that solidified, kind of defined package of first person movement. I think is just a fantastic feeling, and I don't think I've played too many games that I can think of, especially recently, that feel as good to move around and feel as responsive control wise as Apex, and then layer that kind of feeling on top of the way that they have the characterization in the same kind of way that Overwatch has its own cast of characters, and they all have personality and storylines that are intertwined. Apex has all of that too. It's just a bit different of a look than I guess what Blizzard goes for, but it's a great
mhm,
universe. It's connected to Titanfall 2, which is another game that feels just immaculate. Obviously, they're very tied together. And the other thing I really like about it too is that it encourages it encourages action, because some of these battle royales, I think you can kind of get by with hiding a little bit, or letting other people fight and kind of just waiting around and being
right.
very stealthy. Whereas in
You can
Apex,
be
I
a
mean,
bit passive.
yeah, and it's not that you can't do that in Apex, but the thing is, it kind of comes back to bite you in the ass later on, because if you don't get into fights, the way you upgrade your armor in Apex is you can either find some better armor on the ground, but that's not always easy to do, or later on you have to kill people and take their armor, which if they have better armor than you, that's hard to do. So, but also you can level it up by dealing damage. So when you have a tier 1 white armor, if you do 200 damage, then it'll level up to be a blue armor, and up the scale it goes. So you're actually encouraged to fight early on as well, to deal damage, then get better armor for later fights, so you can kill more people to level up. And it's just this great chain of encouraging you to be in the action, which I've come to appreciate as like a great incentive to not play so passively. So just the full package Apex is so great, and definitely my favorite battle royale, and I think it's really influenced the way that I like my shooters to feel too. So easy answer for me there.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where like you don't always think about those types of games as being really influential because oftentimes they're like the social game that's like, oh, I want to hang out with my buddies. What are they doing tonight? Oh, we can just play some Apex, right? And it's almost kind of like becomes like a default choice of like, oh, we don't really know what else we want to do. But like you end up spending so much time in the game and like just because it's kind of got that casual or like multiplayer, or like, just one more match kind of feel to it doesn't mean that there isn't like a lot of value in the way that the game is designed. And so
100%, yeah.
I think that's a great answer. Um, my answer is actually going to be our first overlap here. It's not
Ooh,
Apex, but I'm adding on to my list the Persona series,
nice, nice, nice.
which you'd gone over. And I think I was thinking about it doing the same thing. And, I played some really amazing games this year. And obviously, Secure, I've kind of, got covered in my list. Like, God of War was an amazing experience for me. One of the best games I've played. And I played a lot of things I really I've played a lot of like third person action story driven games. Like that's not super new or outside of my wheelhouse, even though it was like an extremely high quality version of one of those games.
Right.
But Persona was a really different game for me. Like it's got the turn based combat and like the strategy and those elements are not unfamiliar to me. But I think it's actually the life sim aspect that really stood out as being something different I'd never experienced before. And I just felt that like as a whole package, it worked so well being tied into the gameplay and the dungeon crawling, the exploration and the story. But when it came down to it, kind of the thing that stood out the most about Persona, aside from amazing soundtrack, of course, just was those moments in between where you're like, I'm gonna hang out with my this friend, or like someone just texted me, I'll look at it quickly, and it's like, oh, Ryuji wants to hang out today. I will go hang out with Ryuji, and you kind of like get to know these characters. And it's a bit of a slow burn because I think I spent 120 hours to beat it, and
Sounds
I
about
haven't
right.
played Royal yet. I do want to go and play Royal, but I've just played the original. But I felt like I got to know these characters so well. And I've fallen in love with characters before and really gotten invested in stories. But this is the first time I ever really like felt like I kind of had a social aspect, getting to know like as if these were people I knew in real life or like characters I could just hang out with. And I'd never experienced a game in that way. And I think that was just really special, and it's kind of like opened up that realm of like social sim kind of games. And like I don't know how many more I'll play because like a lot of them have that dating aspect which doesn't really appeal to me. But I just
Hmm.
thought it did such a good job of being like kind of like a world of characters that you really start to like create bonds with, on top of being an amazing RPG just in its own right. So yeah, Persona 5 just it really stood out as being something very different, I think.
Yeah, it is, and you're right about about the dating sim aspect. Like, because if you go and play a full dating sim game, it's all about the romance, and you don't really want that. Whereas Persona, like, sure, there is relationships you can get into, but it's more just because naturally that might happen in high school. It's not because that's the focus of the game. It
Hmm.
is more about the friendships in the group and how they all interact and the dynamic between the characters. Like, you're totally right, and you feel like you almost are
Yeah.
hanging out with them in a way if you really let yourself kind of fall into that for a minute. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's really great. So
So
our
yeah.
next question. So our next question is. We went through last time and we outlined our favorite game for each PlayStation console, PlayStation 1 through 4. So, of course, we've now got the PS5 and we need to add to the list our favorite PS5 games so far. Now, I mean, obviously, there's not too many specifically PlayStation 5 games out yet that we've played. And we've set it to it has to be a game that isn't is has a PS5 version is what we said, right?
Hmm.
Even if you played a PS4 game on the PS5, it has to have a PS5 version. So, really curious. I mean, I actually think I know what you put. Actually, now that I say that out loud, but go ahead. Go ahead. You start.
Yeah, I thought this was kind of just more of like a cheeky, cute question because obviously when we answered the other ones, we had very large libraries to pull from, and we're still quite early in the PS5's catalog of games, and so I've gone with Demon Souls. I don't think it's a surprise. I love that
Yeah.
game. It was my like it's the one PS5 exclusive game I've bought for it. Had a great time, and so I'm interested to see how this maybe we'll update this in the future. And it's kind of just sort of a cheeky, cute question for now, but easily Demon Souls didn't think about it.
Right, yeah, and I didn't think about mine too much either. I put Miles Morales for mine, although I'm sure it's gonna probably have a good chance of being Ratchet and Clank next month. But
Yeah, that
uh,
game looks amazing.
oh man, it does. But until then, it was Miles Morales. I just think it's a great package. I mean, the graphics blew me away when I booted that up for the first time, and just the
Hmm.
lighting aspects and like how quick the city loads, the fast travel. Man, it was a great experience. Love Miles Morales, and so that would be my answer for that. So now we're into the PS Plus questions, Kate, and these are the ones I think I'm most interested to see what your answers are
Yeah.
in terms
So
of that.
yeah,
So,
these tie back to obviously we do our PS Plus segment every month. We both pick one of the PS Plus games and kind of play through it and see what PlayStation's offering in terms of those freebies. So these next four questions kind of will relate back to what we've played over the year, involving in that section. So the first question is, what has been your favorite PS Plus experience?
hmm. Well, I had two games written down here, and I think I just want to shout out Fall Guys because I had a really good time with Fall Guys for about a week and a
Hmm.
half, maybe 2 weeks. Had a blast playing that, like just squatting up online with people, and it's really good to hang out and just chill and play some Fall Guys. There's not much thinking involved. So that was fun,
Hmm.
but I just fell off of Fall Guys a lot, and I don't think I look back on it quite
You
as
fell
fondly.
off?
Yeah, oh, I fell off multiple times, let me tell you that. But yeah, I don't think I look back on it as fondly as I had, as fondly as I maybe expected I would. We kind of thought it might not be a great game in terms of longevity anyway, at least for us. I know there's a
Hmm.
lot of people on Twitch and whatever that want to play it all the time, but my answer for this actually might be surprising, but I think my favorite PS Plus game that I played for the show is Erica, which is the kind of choose your own adventure, cryptic kind of seance spells, and it's a bit of a scary game in a few ways, like in terms of what happens with her and the story wise. Don't want to spoil anything there,
Hmm.
but I really enjoyed Erica. I thought it was cool that it tied in with the phone app. I like games like that anyway, like Man of Medan and Heavy
Hmm.
Rain and all those kind of story based narrative adventures. So Erica was a good one for me, and I think that's my answer.
Okay, well that is really interesting. You know what? I have a dumb, funny answer to say first, but my actual answer, and I'll just get to it, was also Erica.
No
I
kidding.
Yeah, I think it just really stuck out to me as such a fun, like, interactive kind of like movie almost, and the phone app was cool. It was just a really memorable night playing it. So yeah, I really enjoyed Erica. But obviously you got to have a bit of a dumb answer to go along with this. So I've also put down Bug Snacks. um, Not that I
Bunger,
loved Bug
bunger, bunger,
Snacks,
bunger,
but
bunger.
exactly. But we say Bunger Bung, like the people I played it with, we say Bunger Bunger all the time. Like, we can't not say. Anytime there's a word that's similar, like we were playing a board game the other day, and we had to pick characters, and one of the guys considered picking a character named Bunker. And then so of course we're all like bunker 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 because it's like similar. And so I don't love, we didn't get into Bug Snacks, but the hour I played dicking around, having a couple, maybe I can't remember if we'd had a couple drinks or what, but the hour we played like dicking around in Bug Snacks was so much fun.
Yeah,
But yeah, Erica's
that's
Erica's the,
funny.
the full experience I enjoyed.
That's funny. I'm gonna say too, just to for the rest of the answers, like there's a lot of games on PS Plus that I've played, but not because of PS Plus. Like Final Fantasy VII Remake came on there. There's the
Hmm.
Uncharted collection. There's Shadow of Colossus. Like these are games that I'd played previously to them coming to PS Plus. So I mean, Final Fantasy VII Remake definitely would be my answer for favorite experience, but I didn't play it for PS Plus, so I didn't want to put it.
Right,
Kind of
exactly.
cheating.
Yeah, we're specifically going over like what we've played for our PS Plus segments. Yeah, obviously there's a lot of games that we played in the past, or we just didn't get around to for that segment. So yeah, they just unfortunately don't qualify.
Yeah,
Just to make it a little bit more interesting. So
that's right. So
um,
yeah,
we'll move on to question two. So it's like a game that you would never have played otherwise, but pleasantly surprised you.
So this one, Kate, this is the one I'm most interested for which one you have for this. But my answer is Remnant from the Ashes. I would
Okay.
never have played that. I mean, it doesn't look, the screenshots and like the icon don't look particularly interesting. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not always one for like the Souls kind of combat. Not that I don't like it, but it doesn't draw me and pull me to like really want to try it. But I played
Mm-hmm.
this co-op with a couple friends, and we had a great time. Like just kind of exploring the randomly generated maps, and we really enjoyed the nature of kind of collecting the loot drops and upgrading our weapons. And there's a surprising variety in terms of weapons that you can get and different abilities you can get by beating the bosses and unlocking kind of the weapons that they give you. And it's interesting because the game's a roguelike, or it kind of has some or not a roguelike, but it has some randomly generated parts. So the order you end up
Mhm.
fighting the bosses is different. And so not only is that a different experience for if you were to play compared to me, but also it means if I run into a certain boss, I might have to fight it differently because I haven't unlocked a weapon that you have, or vice versa. So I
Mhm.
think it's a pretty interesting game in that way, because a lot of these other games you can kind of, you know how to beat the boss because you have a certain weapon by that point, and this game maybe has a bit of variety there. I think the lore was interesting too. Like the world was cool story wise, but I mean, there's some issues with kind of some repetitive areas and whatnot. So I won't get into that because I'm talking about the way it surprised me. But I had a really good time with Remnant. Um, and yeah, it's something that I wouldn't have played, but having gotten to try it because of PS Plus, I'm definitely really glad that I did, and I would probably like to play some more of it, to be honest. So that's my answer.
That's awesome. Yeah, Remnant was an interesting game. It was one that I had my eye on already, so I can't say that I was, I wouldn't have played it otherwise. So mine is actually Greedfall is what I've picked.
Okay.
And that was the kind of it was the RPG I'd played that was set in like you were kind of going to a new world, kind of like Europe goes to North America for the first time kind of setting. And I just, it looked like a really generic kind of fantasy RPG to me. It didn't really stand out in any way. It was kind of one of those ones where I just sort of went in with kind of lower expectations. And it actually like surprised me quite a bit. Mostly just in terms of like the world was really interesting and the storytelling was really good and it had a lot of depth in terms of like quest paths that I wasn't expecting. I was thinking it'd be more of like a Skyrim kind of game where you just sort of go along, you do your quests and like, call it a day. Like, oh, I'm a mage, I do my quests, I shoot the magic spells, I'm done. But it actually had a lot of like, you need to get into this building, like you can find a way to like pick a lock and sneak through the back, or you can like talk to someone and like convince them to let you in if you convince them you're someone who has like business being there. And there was just a lot of like variety in how you chose to interact with the world. And it was very clear, like it was all fully voice acted. It was just very clear that it had a lot of like time and effort put into building the world and the characters and the story, which really kind of surprised me and blew me away better than what
Mm-hmm.
I was
Mm-hmm.
anticipating for the game. The gameplay itself, I'd say, was fine. Like the combat didn't draw me in tons, but it also was like interesting enough that it didn't bog the game down. And so I don't think the game was like perfect in the sense that like it's on the top of my list because there's just so many other games I that stand out as being like exceptional I want to play. But it's definitely a game that I have in the back of my mind. Like I would eventually, if I don't have anything else on the go, maybe I would go back and I'm curious to see where it goes, sort of thing. So I ended up going from being like, this is gonna be kind of a slog for a couple hours to like, ooh, actually like I'm gonna file this away for later. So yeah,
Cool.
Greedfall is great and it has a really dedicated community as well. And I think it's kind of a niche game. Like you gotta really be into a lot of reading, a lot of talking to people, a lot of like interact with story and characters and mystery kind of thing. But it genuinely seems like a really good time.
Was that the game that the person was standing facing the wall when you left, and she just?
Yes, it was. A
I'll
little bit
never
of jank.
forget that. That's so
Yeah, that
funny.
was the one. Yeah, would walk into a room and she'd talk. She was like standing against this like wall, just like looking at the corner of the room, and I'd talk to her and she'd do the dialogue with me, and then she'd just go back and stare at the wall somewhere. She was like just clearly stuck. So
Love
yeah, a
it.
little bit of jank, but
Love it.
it's the kind of jank that almost like makes the game better to
It's
play
yeah, it's
because
like charming in a
like
way.
yeah, like it obviously shouldn't be happening, but it's also like just makes for some kind of funny, memorable moments. So.
Well, speaking of some jank Kate, or maybe games we didn't like quite as much, let's move to the next question, which is the PS Plus game that disappointed you the most. What's
Mhm.
your answer for that?
This was probably the easiest question I had in the whole quiz. Worms Rumble.
Oh.
This game was terrible. It sullied the name of Worms. It was so bad. Because I went into it like actually excited because it's been a very long time since I've played a Worms game. But I remember we used to play them growing up, and it was like fun that turn-based like back and forth of like
Yeah.
you get all the ridiculous weapons and you're trying to make the shots on that like 2D kind of board. And they were like stupid but fun, and so that's what I was expecting. But this one is like an actual like real-time FPS. But the problem is they still move like worms, so like it's so slow and it feels so bad to control, and like it doesn't translate well at all to the new style of like being a competitive kind of
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
real-time shooter, and it just feels like everything that worked for it as old worms did not work in the new worms, and it was just I've never been so bored playing a
Oh
game
no.
before than
I'm
when
so
I had to
sorry.
play Worms Rumble.
I'm
So
so sorry.
don't do it. It's terrible.
Oh man. Well, mine. I mean, I'm a big fan of Rocket League, as you know. Played a lot of
Mhm.
Rocket League. Not that I'm an amazing player, but you know, it's a fun game. I really like it. And so I
Mhm.
was very excited to try out Destruction All Stars when that came
Yes.
out. And I think it's not that it's a terrible game. Like we checked it out, and I mean, it controlled fine. It was just very bland. As much personality as it tried to have, and the kind of style of
Mhm.
game you can see what it's going for, right? This kind of fun character action. Like I was just saying about Apex, the different characters
Yeah,
and the
exactly. It's
personality,
going for that kind of style.
and it's really going for that, and it's really trying its best. But I mean, in terms of like what I expected, especially since it was a PS5 exclusive game, like it was the PS Plus offering that was strictly for PS5 users. It's a full price game that was supposed to come out, and it got a bit delayed and then ended up being put on PS Plus, which maybe was a damning sign from the start in terms of like going from an $80 retail price to free on PS Plus. But you know, it had potential, but I just think it lacked any real personality or kind of substance. And I'm sure maybe it might get updated, but at least when I played it for the show, I was pretty disappointed in terms of what I wanted from something like that. So hopefully it improves. Maybe I'll check it out in the future, like we said. But I think it would take a
Mhm.
pretty substantial kind of reworking or update or new game mode or something to really change that perception on there. So yeah,
Mhm.
Destruction All Stars. It's too bad, but I think maybe I liked it a bit more than you liked Worms. Let's just maybe say that.
I sure hope you did. Okay, and we'll end off PS Plus with a little bit more positivity. So, what's a game you were not lucky enough to get in our PS Plus catalog as like one of your games for the month, but you will eventually go and play?
Well, I mean, two answers for this kind of. My first answer is that I would like to go back and actually play some more Hollow Knight, just because I know you and another one of my friends, especially, are huge fans of Hollow Knight, and I didn't put it for my answer here because technically I did get to try it, and so
Right.
it would kind of not be in the spirit of answering this, but that would be the game I'd like to go
You
back and play the
know what?
most.
You know what's a really cute coincidence as you said that? So I have like a bunch of wallpapers on my computer, and I just have them set to like cycle
Yeah.
through all of them. And they're wonderful. And just as you said that, I can see a little bit like, I don't have all of my screen covered, so I'm kind of looking at the background a little bit, and I've got my notes and stuff up. But just as you said that, one of the like screenshots I took in Hollow Knight came into focus as the wallpaper, and I just thought to myself like, "Oh, Hollow Knight's beautiful." And then just as
It's
I thought
perfect.
that, Hollow Knight, yeah. So I highly recommend
Yeah, Hollow Knight.
it.
But my real answer was going to be I was looking through the list, and honestly, like a lot of the games that I'm really drawn to playing on PS Plus over the last year that I didn't play because of PS Plus, I've already played them uh, just
Mm,
outside of that. So my answer is going to be Middle Earth: Shadow of War, and you know
okay.
I don't know a whole lot about the game, but I just remember getting Shadow of Mordor back kind of in the early PS4 days, and I thought that game was actually pretty interesting. I mean, it's kind of open world, what you expect, like climb the towers and unlock the
Mhm.
map kind of thing. But some of the skills you get later on are pretty cool. Like I remember I had this skill where I could shoot this light arrow and then teleport to where it lands, and there was a lot of cool movement, and some of the combat actually felt pretty good. And then it was also really well beloved for that what's it called, the nemesis system, right, where you
Mhm. Yeah.
the enemies are kind of building up rivalries in the background, and I'm interested to see more than anything how that system kind of evolved and what the sequel ended up being. I think there was some controversy around Shadow of War when it first came out. I think maybe there was like loot boxes or something. Just maybe that's completely wrong and it's coming out of my head the wrong way, but I remember something like that. So I would imagine now that it's been out for a few years now and it's been on PS Plus, maybe they've fixed some of the problems, and I'd like to try that at some point, just maybe more as an experiment
Yeah.
more than anything.
That's right. I was the one that took that one for the month, so that's why you didn't play it. And I wasn't
Yeah, yeah.
super keen on it, so
Hmm.
hopefully you enjoy it more than I did. Um, but I've got here, this was really easy for me. These are two games that I knew I wanted to play regardless, and then both happened to come to PS Plus. And that's Final Fantasy VII Remake. And also the other one is Control, which was one of the
Oh
games you
man,
played and really
yeah,
enjoyed. So
so good.
both of those are already games that I had high on my list, and now I love that they're on PS Plus. I can conveniently play them on PS5.
Oh yeah, 7
So
remake, you
yeah,
gotta try it. It's
yeah,
it's amazing
I'm
game.
really looking forward to it. So it
Really,
just
really
yeah, it
good.
saved me some money. I PS Plus, thank you.
All right, well, let's get into the new questions that we did not have on the quiz last time. The first one being this, Kate. Which is your favorite single player game you played this year?
Well, I think nobody's gonna be surprised. It's Sekiro. Come on. Of course. I spoke about it in depth last episode, so I won't make you listen to it once again, but yeah, Sekiro, clear answer.
Nice.
No
Okay.
contest.
Yeah, mine is. I went a little bit off the path with this one. I've played. I mean, I haven't beat as many games as I did the previous year since that happened. I don't know if it's because I've been checking out more stuff for the podcast or whatnot. And I mean, I
Mhm.
beat the Royal this year. I'm not going to list it as my game. I've talked about Persona too much, but I really want to shout out Maquette here, that puzzle game I played a few months ago
Oh,
for PS
okay.
Plus.
Yeah.
That game was just something so unique that I don't think I played a a puzzle game that unique, maybe especially like a first person one, since Portal or Portal 2. Not that I'm putting it anywhere near kind of the realm of those games, because those are really legendarily beloved kind of genre
Mhm.
defining puzzle games. But Maquette is very interesting, and the mechanics they put in there, and in terms of like playing with perspective and growing not only your environment and different objects in size, but then later you're kind of growing and shrinking your own character in the same way, and it gets really in depth, and I'm a big fan of it. So I would definitely recommend Maquette, and I think that's what I'm gonna have to shout out here. I mean, there's a lot of games, and on any different day I might pick a different first, like a
Mhm.
different single player game to shout out here. I really enjoyed Control. I enjoyed Final Fantasy VII, but Maquette was just something very unique, so I wanted to give it a shout out.
That's awesome, and I think that's such a good sign, like, and it's really hard to compare things, like, how do you compare Control to Maquette, right? Like, they're
Yeah.
so vastly different, and that's awesome that we've had a lot of really good
Yeah, I mean,
experiences.
yeah, and it had a great story too. It was another aspect that I think is not really expected when you go into a puzzle game, and so that was something I
Mhm.
mean, I didn't really know it had too much of a story, and then I booted up, and it's actually pretty heartfelt, and yeah, it's just really cool.
That's awesome. Okay, and another question in a similar kind of vein, but this time, what is your favorite co-op experience of the year?
I got a short answer for this one just because I haven't talked about it on the show yet. But
Okay.
me and Ash have been playing a lot of It Takes Two, and we're getting really
Mhm.
close to the end. And I'm going to talk about it on the show. So probably on either the next episode or the one after, depending how. I know we got some E3 stuff coming up on the next show, so I don't know if we're going to have a ton of time. But within the next couple episodes, I'll be talking about our experience with It Takes Two, and we've had just an awesome time, and it's one of the best co-op games I played in a long time. So It Takes Two is great.
That's awesome. Okay, I've actually kind of got a question in a similar vein. Very different game, but I went back to Divinity Original Sin 2. I know I talked about it a lot on the show, but it's been a while because I think I kind of finished it near the early on in
It
in
was,
our
yeah.
in our podcasting history. But that's a game, yeah, my boyfriend and I played it together, and I think it's an amazing game. I easily could have won favorite single player game. But the co-op is so well baked into it, that we just had such a good time, not just playing the game, but also like all the little moments. I think where that in between gameplay, like making decisions. Oh, what dialogue option should we pick for this person, and like, oh, should we help this person or should we not help them? Just so many little moments where you stop and you're trying to problem solve together, and so it was a game that's just amazing in its own right, but was really enhanced, I think, by playing it co-op. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
that
think so
that
too.
game is phenomenal. Um, okay, and then the next question, and so this one's kind of a fun one. Just what's a funny recent gaming experience?
um, well, this one, I don't know if you're gonna have the same answer as me, Kate, but I really loved playing We Were Here Too, and the more I look back on it with you and having those hilarious glitches and like, oh my god, the door's not open. Okay, the door opened, but now the cubes, I can't move the cubes, and like, and meanwhile you're like, oh my god, the stairs are falling away, like the lava's gonna get me, and just we went from like frustration and not being able to figure out if something was wrong to like, no, we definitely know what we're doing. There's just a glitch happening, to like, oh my god, this is so frustrating, to just like having this funny experience with this
Yeah,
game.
we had transcended the situation to something like, oh my god, you'll never guess what's gone wrong this
Yeah,
time.
it was just the perfect storm of, I think we were just in the right mood to kind of deal with some of the jank, and it ended up being an enjoyable experience that added to our game, I think. So I really think that was just one of the funniest things, and that's got to be my answer for sure.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you said that because I agree that is one of the best funny co-op things. But I'm glad I picked something else just to get a second story in here. So recently, I've been playing. My friend Zane bought the new Pokemon Snap,
Ooh, very
and
exciting.
so we've been playing a bit of it, and it's pretty good. We're enjoying it. I mean, he's played a lot, and I've played some of it with him, and so we kind of at the point now where like he's unlocked all the courses, and we kind of have everything like completed, but there's still a lot of like points to get in certain pictures, and there's those puzzle aspects of like getting the Pokemon to do a specific thing that you get a picture of. And so there's actually still a lot of content to play, but we're kind of like, you only take it so seriously. But some of the ways that the professor ranks these pictures is so funny. Like, he doesn't care about so many of your artistic decisions. Like, he's like, how big is the Pokemon? And that's basically like the only thing he cares about. And he's like, oh yeah, size is like, for some reason, that category, because it ranks like there's a few categories it ranks kind of like similar to the first Snap, but for some reason size is like quadruple the points of everything else. It's really interesting though, because you kind of have like your cursor, and it kind of aims like a shooter, right? It's like the on rails and you're taking pictures, but what it does is it lets you, and I don't think the original game had this. I think the original game just sensed if it was like in the picture, but it lets you specifically like there's the picture box that you're taking a picture of, and then it also has like a cursor. You put it on a specific Pokemon, and like it denotes that that is the Pokemon you're mainly taking a picture of. So that way, if
Right.
there's like 3 Pokemon in the frame, you're like, I'm gonna specifically picking like this Wingull. And so like when you're giving the professor the Pokemon at the end, it's like, oh, this is a picture of Wingull, even though maybe it has like 3 other Pokemon in the picture. That's how it tells which like Pokedex part it's getting applied to. But sometimes it ends up with like the funniest stuff. So he already like scores it, and like you cannot predict what he's gonna say when you go to the score. Like you might think you've done something really like great, and it's like horrible, and then
He's like,
vice
this is
versa all the
terrible.
time. He's like, yeah, he has no like logical reasoning for some of his decisions. And then so it also like with the selecting Pokemon, it's kind of weird because sometimes you'll be like, oh, here's like a picture of like Pikachu. He's like right in the front of the picture, but it's like, oh, there was a Trubbish like way the fuck in the background, and it's like a picture of Trubbish. So we've been having so much fun with that. But like recently we've had a couple times, and just even yesterday we had some times where like he can't tell what's in the picture. So like I had this beautiful picture of Wailord that I'd taken. He was like coming out from behind this rock. He was in like 80% of the picture because he's so big. It was like one of the best pictures I'd ever taken. I was so excited. I'd gotten him with his mouth open, which was hard to do. And I was so excited to show him my Wailord picture. I was like, there's going to be so many points. And we get to the end. I'm like, here you go, my pictures. And he's like, oh, I don't see a Pokemon in here.
Are you
And it's
kidding?
like the picture's like 80% of it is Wailord. Like there's nothing else in the picture. And he's like, yeah, there's no Pokemon in this picture. I don't know who this is. It's like, it's a big fucking whale. And he's like, what is this? And then, so we did that run, and I was like, oh, I can't believe it. And then the next run I did, there was just some like nuts on the ground, like some acorns that had fallen off of this tree, and I took a picture of it because I was like, oh, acorns, like haha, that's funny. And then we get to the end, and he's like, oh, that's a great picture of a Wurmple you've taken. And like we're
There's
both
no
looking, we're like,
Pokemon in the
where the
picture.
hell is Wurmple? Like I just took a picture of nuts. And so like I submitted it because like, well, I want to see how many points my nuts got. Like, and like the picture that was already in the Pokedex, because you can only, it's like previous Snap, you can only have one of each
Yeah,
Pokemon.
yeah,
And
right.
so like he'll score it, show you the 2 scores, then you choose which one to keep. And so Zane had already taken a really nice picture of this Wurmple like crawling along a tree stump. Like it was so nice. You could send it on a postcard. And my picture of nuts with Wurmple like nowhere visible was only like 100 points off of his like beautiful crawling along a tree.
Man, that's just
And
insulting towards your friend, you know?
so we were cracking up because we're like, what is this guy? He thinks Wurmple's in this picture, but he can't see this massive whale.
Like, who are you to
I'm
judge my
like,
pictures at this point? It's so obvious.
right? It's like, I don't think he's a real professor. Like, it's
Pokemon
just
Snap,
so
man.
like, yeah. So we just had such a good time, like just taking like progressing into like these are these dumb pictures. Like, what is he gonna say about it? And so,
That's awesome. I
yeah,
can't wait to try that game out, but I mean, it sounds a bit frustrating for sure from what I've
for
heard.
the most part, it's great. Like, it is genuinely really fun, and like it works well 80% of the time, but 20% of the time you just get these like silly things, like it just doesn't interpret it the way that you wanted it to, and maybe you controlled it slightly weird with the way you had the cursor at the time, and
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
it's just kind of funny. But yeah, I've been enjoying Pokemon Snap, and it's just been a really hilarious time.
Especially with shit like that happening to you.
Yes,
100%.
exactly.
Wow. All right, Kate. So, next question. What's the worst game you've played this year? Was it
So I'm
Worms
kind
Rumble?
of Worms Rumble easily. But I'm kind of double dipping because I've picked this game called Quest Hunter.
Oh, I
So
think you
this,
told me about this before. I don't even
yeah.
know how this
So
came into existence.
this I originally had as my funny game experience, and I thought I could double dip a little bit because it's also objectively the worst game I've ever played, maybe even worse than Worms. But it's this game, and a friend that one of the guys I normally play with, he found this game, and he's like, "Oh, it's co-op, like couch co-op, like we could play it. It looks fun. It's kind of like a I don't know, like a top-down RPG, and you sort of have to like just go around and do these little quests, and like, oh, might be cool. We should play it." And it's just terrible. Like it feels awful. The quests are like the most bare bones, terrible quests you've ever played. Like there's no really distinction between the four characters that you get to play as. The controls feel awful. Like combat is literally like how like base Skyrim the combat is
Yeah,
like you
yeah.
just go up and you
Hmm.
like
Your
flail your
sword.
sword and like eventually something dies. And so
Yeah,
like
there's like no contact.
yeah, there's no contact. Like it's so bad. But we started it on New Year's Day. I specifically remember. We'd had our New Year's Eve whatever we'd done to celebrate, and then New Year's Day we're like we're gonna start Quest Hunter, and we the whole time we're like this game is terrible, like it's just awful, like
Just
I can't
complaining the
believe it,
whole
like
time.
they were like, I can't believe you bought this. And so, but we played it for like 5 hours. And we spent the whole time being like, this game is terrible. Like, why are we still playing? But like, we just kept like making fun of it the whole time. We must have played for like 5 straight hours, like just like harping on it, but like having a good time. And ever since then, we've never sat down and played again. But every now and again, one of us just pops up and we're like, hey, so like, we're gonna play some Quest Hunter tonight. And we haven't gone back. We're like, we've agreed that like one day we've got to finish this game. Like, it's just become like such a meme inside our group.
God bless you if you
Um,
do.
yeah, so
Oh
never
man.
ever play Quest Hunter. It's terrible, but like, oh boy, we're having a great time.
Unless you're right in the mood for it, right?
Yeah, you
But
gotta be in the mood to like, it's like when you watch like a really bad horror movie and just like
yeah, yeah.
laugh about it. It's the gaming equivalent of that.
Yeah. So for mine, I don't have a funny story much about it, as much as I just think like it's a bit of a hot take, because mine I wrote down is PUBG. And this is
Okay.
another game I played through PS Plus, and I didn't put it as my most disappointing game because I wasn't really going in with too many expectations. But man, like
Hmm.
I just I don't know how people can still play this, to be honest with you. Um, Especially in terms of, like we've said, there's a lot of different great battle royales that are out. Like there's Valorant
Hmm.
now. There's a bunch of different ones that are just getting a lot of good reviews. People seem to really like them, and yet PUBG just has this following still, as far as I know. I know the numbers are probably going down a bit, but that game was just, it looked like something from Windows 2000, when I played it. Like just kind of square environments and bad textures, and it didn't feel good to control. I mean, I remember shouting out, like trying to think of a positive about it when I was talking about it on the show. And I remember, if I don't know if you remember this, but I was like, yeah, it's really cool. Like as you're aiming down the sights, you can kind of lean left or right to look around corners. And like that was the that
That
was
was
the
the
thing.
best thing you could come up
That
with.
was like the most unique thing, and I like that's not even unique to it. Like Battlefield, I'm pretty sure has that, or some of the newer Call of Duties and whatever. So it's not even like that was too amazing. I just don't really understand the the fervor for this thing. I guess like
I think what it was is it was one of the first battle royales. So I think maybe like that kind of like concept carried it a bit. And
yeah.
then I think too it has like a bigger PC following, so maybe it like plays a little bit nicer
I mean maybe
there.
I think it gets a lot of its following because it's quote unquote the most realistic in terms of
Yeah.
Like maybe the most realistic in terms of the HUD it gives you, or like the guns are the most realistic, or you can
I
lay
kind of
prone
see it
and
being like I kind of see it like appealing to more of like the people on PC who are really big like Counter-Strike
yeah, yeah.
fans. I think people who are like into that kind of like aesthetic would maybe enjoy it more so than some of the like more action or cartoony battle
I guess
royales
so, but then it's
that are out.
I just
But
don't know why those people wouldn't want to play Warzone more then, because Warzone's not particularly unrealistic or like futuristic or anything like that. So I don't know. To each their own. Like I'm happy a lot of people tend to enjoy PUBG, but I just couldn't. I don't see any appeal honestly, and I don't ever want to play it again or go near it again.
well, we will never make you, I promise. It's gonna be okay.
It's gonna be okay. So
You're gonna
Kate,
come out of this a stronger person.
yeah. Let's get past PUBG though. I need to get that out of my mind. What is the coolest or most creative new mechanic that you've come across?
Okay, well, I mean, you've already taken in PUBG, you can like tilt to the corner a little bit, so I'm gonna have to come up with something different than that. And I'm gonna do a quick shout out just to Sekiro's combat because I've
Yeah.
spoke about it way too much on the podcast, but it's so unique and it's such a cool system. I love it. So quick shout out to that. But I'm gonna go with the wind mechanic in Ghost of Tsushima.
Ooh, nice.
I just love how they've done the map in that game and the way that, like, if you're in a quest or you've just even selected somewhere on the map you want to go, instead of having like a mini map or a quest marker or something like that, you follow the wind. The wind blows in the direction of where you've indicated that you want to go.
And it works
And
so
so
well.
it works so well. It's really clear and easy to follow. But it makes the game feel so like beautiful and immersive to be in because they've really done such a good job with the art to make like all the flowers and the grass blow in the wind, and there's always like leaves falling from trees that get picked up and swirled around by it. And so you follow that, and I find that like I tend to look so much more about around my environment I'm in. Whereas like when you have a mini map or a quest marker you're following, even in a game like say Red Dead Redemption 2, which I think is like also like an absolutely stunning environment, you spend a lot of time looking at your mini map to make sure you're going the right way. So the wind removes that kind of like element of just like I'm playing a video game, and it really just kind of like lets you exist in that world a lot more naturally. And then if you're not following the wind or something, there's often times where like a bird will fly by, and if you follow the bird it might take you to like a hidden little point of interest or something. So I think like it's such a subtle small detail, but it completely changes the way the game feels to play. And I think it's so smart. I've never been so like naturally directed in a game but still have like full control of like I this is my destination, I want to go here, I want to do this quest. But it still, but it like it's the perfect balance of getting both of those things where you're in control, you're not lost, you're not just exploring or wandering, you've got a goal, you're going there, but you're going there like with the game, not
Hmm.
based off of like following a map.
Yeah,
So
totally
I
organic.
think,
I agree.
yeah,
That was one of
it's
my shout outs too. Like I love
yeah,
Tsushima, like
it's
played shitload of it.
amazing.
That wind is great, and it works so well. Like that's just the part that blew me away. Even if you need to, you might need to navigate around a mountain or like some water or something that's in your way, but you still know which direction you're going, even if you have to kind of face a different direction, head north instead of west for a little bit. But you can always follow the wind. It always is helpful.
Mhm.
So yeah, the wind's great. But that wasn't my main answer. I actually put down Gorogoa for my answer. I don't know if you remember this, but this is one of the puzzle games I played, I think early on in the show as well. And this was actually a phone game that I played, although it's on Switch and everything as well. But this is the
Mhm.
game where you're kind of zooming in and out of pictures and lining them up together and lining up like, okay, well, there's a little door on the cover of this book. So if I zoom in on the book and then put it next to this house that the person is standing next to over on the left side of my screen, then all of a sudden they can walk through this door. And then when I zoom out again, they're all of a sudden on the cover of this book because they went through
Oh,
the door on the
yes.
cover, for
I
example.
remember this game. You like came over and showed me the game on your phone because you're like, this is so cool. You got to look at this. And it was so creative.
Yeah, I just never experienced a game. I mean, I'm sure there's games that do something similar. There's a lot of creative different puzzle games out there. Like I just talked about
Mhm.
Maquette too, but But to me, Gorogoa is just something else. And the depth that this game gets to, it really is something that I mean, I think everyone should buy this game and play it. I think it's like $10 or less and everyone has a phone, right? So just, you
Mhm.
got to play Gorogoa. The way these puzzles interact and some of the ways you have to zoom in and out are just, you'd never expect it. And then you zoom in and look at this little corner of a town or something, you realize there's another door, or sometimes there's like a ladder your character needs to climb up and you see a ladder that's in the sky or something in the stars, and you'll zoom in on that and then move it around, and all of a sudden your character can just move to this brand new location, and it's just something else. It's really confusing at certain points, but if you just take a second and explore, and it's almost like an I Spy in certain places where you need to really look at, like, consider what you're looking at and how it can be aligned with other areas that you have available. But when you figure it out and kind of get into the groove, it's something else. And I really think it's one of the most standout mechanics I've probably ever ran into, let alone just this year. So Gorogoa for sure for
Mhm.
me. But
That's
yeah, shout out to
awesome.
the wind in Tsushima. That's, I mean,
Mhm.
phenomenal as well. um
Absolutely.
what is your best boss fight of the year, Kate?
So again, this is, you can groan along. I'm not gonna talk about Sekiro. But like the final boss fight and some of the other boss fights in the game are like, probably the coolest boss fights I've ever played in a game. I love them. But I want to talk about God of War actually.
Hell yeah, which one?
Specifically the first and the final boss fight. So maybe cover your ears if you don't want some God of War spoilers. But I've got to say the two fights in conjunction, when you fight Balder for the first time and then when you
Mm-hmm.
fight Balder at the end, they're both, first of all, they're both amazing fights just in their own right. It really sets the tone and starts out really well. Gets you kind of grooving with the combat when you first fight Balder, and he also shows up. He adds like a lot of like mystery and intrigue into the game because you don't know who he is, you don't know why he's here at your house. He's just shown up to pick a fight, and like so he kind of like
He does.
starts the game off on a really good foot. He's quite a bit smaller than Kratos, and you're like, oh, you idiot! Like, you don't want to. Do you know who you're talking to? Like, you don't want to pick a fight with Kratos. And then he like uppercuts you like into the next dimension, and like Kratos is like, oh shit! Like,
Like, oh
I gotta
shit, I'm
take
not
this
used to this.
seriously. And you're like, you're picking up trees and like cracking mountains, and like it's super epic.
It's almost like Dragon Ball
Um,
Z in a lot of
it
ways, like
really is
breaking the
it's
environment.
it's so over the top, but in like a really like throwback God of War kind of way. But then you fight him again at the end, and this fight is very different because it's now like you and Atreus fighting him together, and you're both equally as important in the fight. And I think like it was again a really fun fight that kind of showcased a lot of the potential of the combat, but I think it also was so good in terms of story to kind of show through gameplay just how strong of a bond and how much Kratos and Atreus have grown together. Because this game is very much about their journey and those two like building their relationship and connecting and opening up to each other. And this final fight or like encompasses that so well. And so I think like not only are they great fights just in terms of them being really fun and being really cinematic and being a joy to play, but it also like does such a good job of like tying together just how much these characters have grown throughout their journey.
I'm totally with you on that. I think it shows like Kratos in none of the other God of War games. I don't think he's ever needed assistance from another character to defeat one of the other enemies, right? But in this game, maybe there's one or two examples, but in this game, like you said, he really relies on Atreus, and it shows, like maybe he's getting a bit older, maybe he's not realized just how powerful his son is. But I mean, Atreus is vital to that, and you're right. It
Hmm.
exemplifies their relationship, and it's on top of that,
Yeah.
it's just fun to play too. Like that, the mechanics
Yes.
and like the fight against Balder, like he's formidable, and you really feel like you gotta execute well. Maybe not like flawlessly. It's not like the toughest game in the world, but it's the combination of just how fun it is to fight him in like tandem with those story elements. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Hmm. Exactly. And I think like there's a moment too where like at the beginning of the game, Kratos is very much like holding back Atreus, like he's trying to protect him and shelter him, and he's sort of like he doesn't allow him to live up to his full capacity. And I think like it's very much like your Kratos, your perspective is you're you're raising Atreus as your son, but I think Kratos learns more from Atreus than Atreus learns from Kratos in a lot of ways. And so after you've kind of like been holding him back the whole time and like trying to protect him, there's a moment in the fight where it's like Kratos calls on him and he's like, Atreus, like like it's up to you almost. Like he kind of like
Mm-hmm,
gives
mm-hmm.
him like a really important part that like any like that trust of like knowing that Atreus is going to be able to do it and is really strong because it's like it's Kratos is not really open to trusting others, or he's very much a like I work alone kind of like
Well, he hasn't even needed
lone
help
wolf
before,
kind of character. Yeah, not only would he never need help, but also like he would never accept help because he doesn't he's very closed off and angry and he doesn't build relationships with other people. So for him to be kind of the one, sort of asking Atreus to do something for him, kind of like I think was a big moment, like also just for him personally. And
Mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm.
it felt
Another
really cool to
reason.
be like, yeah, it really felt really cool to be like, well, Atreus, like, go, it's time. And then Atreus obviously executes it perfectly because he's a wonderful little boy, and he's very capable himself. And it was just it's awesome. Like,
Man,
I
just
went
another
back and just kind
reason.
of rewatched it and like, oh man, like I got chills.
You do. It's another reason I can't wait to play Ragnarok later. Like going back to that previous
Hmm.
answer, man, it's gonna be good.
Exactly.
My answer for favorite boss fight, I'm really not going to talk about it too much because it is the final boss fight of The Last of Us Part 2, which of course
Okay.
implies heavy spoilers for those that have not played it, including you. So I don't want to spoil it for you because I know you're
Hmm.
getting really close
Yes.
to the end of the first game, and I'm sure you're going to play the second. But what I will say about it is, and this is spoiler free, is whether you end up, whatever you think is going to be the resolution of the story of Part 2, because I mean, it's not out of the realm, you'll kind of guess how the game might end, but whether you
Mhm.
expect it or not, the stakes are just so high. The way that the characters that are involved and the people that are involved in that last boss fight, the stakes are just incredibly high, and it really leaves the player guessing of what the outcome of that fight's going to be. Like you don't know who's going to live and who's going to die by the end, and just has a sense of tension. And what I loved about it even more than that is that you have to play through it because it's a game. So you're sitting there tapping buttons trying to fight this boss, and you can't look away because you have to beat it. But in other mediums you might be like, oh man, it's too stressful, I got to close my eyes. But in The Last of Us, you're forced to play through it and watch it, and it's very emotional, very very stressful, and it's just wonderfully executed, I think. So I can't wait till you get there because I'd love to talk about it more in
Mhm.
depth. But that's all I'll say about that for now. But amazing boss fight, not in terms of
Okay.
like challenge and whatnot, but just in terms of what it means to the story of The Last of Us is phenomenal. So
Okay.
that's that.
I'm really looking forward to it. That is on the horizon for sure.
Anyways, let's go to the next question, which is the character you fell in love with the most.
So I put down and I kind of spoke about ended up speaking about it before earlier in the quiz, but I put down the Persona 5 crew
Hell
just
yeah.
for what I said about before. And I don't think that they're necessarily like the best written characters, especially when you compare it to something like God of War that's really character driven and it's all about, two characters and their relationship. But
Yeah. As an
I just
ensemble though, like it's an
yeah,
amazing
as an
cast.
ensemble, they're great, and not necessarily any one of them individual, but I think it's just all the amount of time that you spend in that game and just slowly kind of building relationships and getting to know them. It's just they feel like very like special, believable, and like real characters. So I just fell in
Mm-hmm.
love with the whole crew in that game.
It's a great shout. For me, my answer is actually Miles Morales from Spider-Man Miles Morales.
Hmm.
I think he was so well characterized in that game, and I remember when I played it, I was so blown away by like the way that they were able to convey that he wasn't quite as experienced as like Peter Parker as Spider-Man in the
Hmm.
first game, because just some of the things he would say, he was very unsure of himself and be asking Pete for advice, or he'd say things to himself like, oh man, I hope this works out, or whereas Pete would be more like, hey, I'm gonna take care of this, like no problem. And he's very much the apprentice, but he's still got the chops, and the other thing I really
Hmm.
liked about him as a character was I loved how they showed that no, he's still such a young kid, like his friend
Hmm.
Genki, in the guy in the chair, right, as they call it in Spider-Man. He's helping Miles out on the intercom, but then at the same time you're swinging through the city, and they're talking about doing their homework, or like, oh man, did you do the homework for tomorrow? They're still just kids, and having this kind of dual relationship as far as fighting crime and saving New York City, but then also having to make it through high school and and everything like that. And then you also throw in some other interpersonal relationships that he has with the main villain, and he's got an uncle that has some interesting story elements and kind of is a bigger part of the story than you'd be led to expect at the start. And I just think that Miles is characterized so well, and then also characterized off of his relationships with the other people in the game, that he's just such a well-developed character, and I can't wait to see how his relationship continues to evolve in the sequels. And I mean, obviously there are going to be a lot more games in that universe coming out of Miles Morales and the first Spider-Man 2018. So I'm just really excited to see how he grows. And this Marvel stuff has all just done so well, whether it's the movies or these games. So yeah, Miles is great.
That's awesome. Sounds
Yeah.
very like grounded, humanizing kind of aspect to the, especially, and I guess that's kind of like usually Spider-Man's sort of shtick. So it's good that they nailed that really well.
Well, yeah, especially in like games too, because video games you're often this unbeatable badass kind of character, and there's examples of the opposite too, but more often than not, you're some badass that like cheers when they shoot 100 guys in the head, right? So having Miles Morales and be so much more grounded and still such a young kid, but also doing these huge monumental fights and battles and stuff is awesome.
I was gonna say, like, I mean, that's the best side. Oftentimes we're doing these cool, really cool monumental things, but oftentimes we're doing something really, really stupid. Um,
So true, yeah.
so, so what was your biggest yell at the screen? No, you idiot! Don't do that
Yeah.
moment.
I gotta say, this was probably the question that I had the most difficulty answering for the
Mhm.
entire quiz. But I settled on I don't remember if you remember me talking about this game, but Bury Me My Love back on the Switch. I played it near the start of the podcast, and it's the game where it's kind of one of those lost cell phone games where you're
Mhm.
a guy who's texting his girlfriend, and she's in a country that's in the middle of kind of a state of war, and she's
Oh,
trying
yes, I
to
remember.
escape and get across the border to safety and find some refuge. And your role in the game is choosing, kind of texting her back and forth and choosing what advice to give her, or she's like, oh man, do you think I should take a ride from this guy? He said he can get me across the border. Or I found this group I've been walking with, and if we continue this way in 3 days, then we're gonna make it. And we've heard there's not a lot of guards, but I'm
Mhm.
not sure. And you're trying to just give advice, and that game was really nerve-wracking at certain points when you'd say, if that was the example, you'd say, like, you've been going with this group for 3 days, like you've gotten along with these people well, I think you should stay with them because you're pretty close and like you trust these guys, right? And then she would
Mhm.
stop responding for what was 2 or 3 days within the game, and then you'd be getting kind of worried, she might have lost service, what happened, was she killed? And then she'll reply back and she's like, oh, I took a ride with the guy. We're in this country now, and I'm fine, but I'm with this guy, and I'll see you in a day. And then she won't respond. You're just
Right,
like, what
and
are
you're
you
like,
doing? Like,
oh God,
oh my
is she
god,
safe?
did it turn
Yeah.
out? Is she gonna be in this guy's trunk as a corpse in a couple days? Like, you just don't know. And so, um, you get to know their relationship a bit. It's got a bit of a romance. Obviously, they're
Mhm.
dating and whatnot. So you just some of the decisions she makes, she's very impulsive compared to the advice I was giving her. Maybe I should have been a bit more reckless, but yeah, there's definitely some interesting moments, and I definitely had a few points where I was like, you idiot, like you're definitely gonna get killed, like this is not gonna turn out well. And somehow she, more often than not, was good news. So I guess that teaches me something. But I definitely had those moments with Bury Me My Love.
Awesome. That game sounds really neat too. I want to check it out. Okay, well mine is was kind of a little bit, well, I guess kind of almost similar in a way, but it's also dumb is I played Resident Evil Biohazard, so
Oh yeah, I'm
RE7,
sure there's a
which
few
was
of those in that
awesome.
game.
Awesome. I really enjoyed it. But the premise of that game is you are Ethan and you go to
Ethan.
Ethan. Exactly. You're not looking for Jason this time though. You're looking for your wife. Or your girl. I don't know if it's your wife or your girlfriend or anyway, your partner. And she's been missing for like 2 years or like quite a substantial period of time before the game takes place. And you finally tracked her down and she's involved with that like Florida family that, how all the marketing was about, that creepy family
The
that you go into.
the scariest family of all time.
Yeah, they're horrifying. And so you obviously the best thing to do is to go into that house by yourself and to start like investigating. And it's like, all right, I'm already kind of drawing the line on what I would do if I was in this guy's shoes.
Yeah,
But it's like it's your girlfriend. You got to go find her, and like
you're
it's been 2 years.
obligated.
You need closure. Like, he's really gonna get a lot of points in this relationship. Like, he's on it. And then, he gets involved with a family. They're awful. They're trying to kill him and eat him, and it's terrible. And then he meets his wife, and I don't think this is a spoiler because I think it might have been in the trailer, but she like turns out she's been kind of brainwashed in a way,
Why am I
and
not
she ends up like
surprised?
cutting your hand off with like an axe or something. And at that point, I'm saying to myself, like, look, man, you tried. She's fucked up. She cut your hand off. I
I think your
think, like, it's already
relationship is
been,
over.
yeah, it's already been 2 years. I think maybe it's just best you move on. And of course, you don't. You spend the rest of the game, in getting swept up in the plot and uncovering the mystery and all this stuff. So, there's a resolution to the end of the game, sure. But at that point, it's like, Ethan, you idiot. Like,
Look,
just
dude.
there's other people out there, and even if there's not, it might just be better to be on your own forever. Like, it's not gonna work out with this girl. And so everything that characters do in horror games is like, no, just go home. Like, please, Ethan. I'm so scared. Stop.
Man, I
Of
really
course,
want to play that game
you
and
just
check
go
it out,
deeper
but
into the house. It's awesome. I really enjoyed it. I'm excited to play Village. I might even start it this weekend potentially.
ooh.
And it's cool. Is Village actually like? I don't know. I don't think you play as Ethan, but he's in the game, so like
Yeah,
it's kind
yeah.
of following this new set of characters, which for me is really cool because 7 was my first Resident Evil, and so like I don't know, like I recognize the names because they're iconic, but I don't really know a lot about like the really big like
Like Chris
long-standing
Redfield and
Resident
those
Evil.
guys, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like they don't really like mean much to me. But Ethan is someone I'm aware of, so like him being the big name drop in Village is also kind of cool because it's like, oh, that's like
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
the one that I have played, and so I want to see how that kind of builds, and then
Um,
also just the game looks great. So
well, I hope Ethan has some better decisions to make in that game at
yeah,
least, but we'll see. I mean,
I hope so. I hope
at least he
so.
obviously survives in 7, I guess it seems, so maybe he didn't make the
Yes.
worst choices.
So spoiler, you do make it out to the end as Ethan, but I think your life could have gone in a much better direction had you just maybe knocked on the door, no one answered. Okay, I'm gonna go home.
Fair enough. All right, Kate, what
Yeah.
is a game you love the concept of so much, but you just don't have the desire to play it?
So this one's kind of cool. It's the game. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called The Longing.
I've not heard of that, no.
Okay, so it's really cool. It's this indie game. I think it came out in 2019, so it's relatively. But the concept is that like you're this shade character and you're waiting 400 days in this like isolated kingdom, and you're trying to like wake up the king. And so there's things you can do as you're waiting for him, and there's like mysteries to uncover. You can sort of like find passages to go and kind of like solve puzzles to open up more of the kingdom, and kind of like do some mysteries and like uncover stuff. But the kind of interesting concept about the game is that it goes in real time.
Oh,
So
interesting.
the game actually lasts 400 days, and
What
you
the?
can beat the game by literally just waiting for 400 days, and the king will wake up. Nothing you do like forces the king to wake up. It isn't like a puzzle you're solving. It's just this like passage of time, and you have like a little room that you can relax in, and your character can like read a book or like just kind of chill out for the 400 days and wait. Or like when you kind of explore a bit, you sort of uncover little bits and pieces, and there's kind of like places maybe you're not supposed to be, but you sort of like force your way in there, and it opens up a little bit.
Hmm,
But that's that concept, like literally 400 days you're waiting.
that's
And
cool.
so
Wow.
it's so strange and creative, and I'm really interested in it, like, but almost more of like to study it, or like in a kind of an academic sense. But it just kind of also sounds awful to play because like it's a huge commitment. And
Yeah.
like yeah, there isn't really much to do. So it's just I'm so intrigued by it, but I also like I just don't know if I want to play it. But like it comes up from time to time and I think about it. And I love that it exists. It's such a weird way to like structure a video game.
That's really unique. I don't think I've ever heard of
Yeah.
anything like that before.
Yeah,
Huh.
I really encourage you to look it up. But it's like,
I
well,
will,
it's 400
100%.
days. But it's also one of those things where it's like, I don't really want to watch a Let's Play because, like,
Yeah.
oh my God, it's
Who has the
400
time?
days.
Who has the time for that? Wow.
Exactly. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, I think you're gonna like my answer for this one. But it'll
Okay.
both surprise and delight you. But
Okay.
or maybe disappoint you a bit too. But my
Oh,
answer would
surprise,
be,
light, and disappoint. This is
well,
the
you're gonna go
roller.
through a real emotional roller coaster on this. My answer for this game is Sekiro.
Aw.
You know, I I love that so many people, including you, love this game so much. I love
Mhm.
the concept of it. You know, I'm really sold on this whole the whole like battle system you were talking about and learning the parries. And it sounds like
Mhm.
if that's the kind of thing that really will click for you, and you want to kind of take the time to not practice, but kind of get acclimated and really sink your teeth into it and get absorbed into that kind of thing. Like it seems like insanely enjoyable and
Mhm.
you know, a great experience, and then add on the lore and everything else. But I don't see myself ever getting and feeling that strong enough pull to really want to. First of all, I'd have to restart, because there's no way I'd want to start halfway through and be expected to take on the tougher enemies without having practice. I mean, maybe I
Yeah.
could use a practice dummy at the start or whatever, but then also I've forgotten a lot of the lore and whatever. So
Mhm.
I'd have to restart it. And I just, first of all, restarting something, I don't know how appealing that is in and of itself at this point. And
Yeah.
in combination with, like, man, I'm stuck on Lady Butterfly, you know, like, she's not the hardest boss in the game. And so I just think maybe it's a little bit out of my skill set in terms of how much time it would take me to get good enough at doing it, get good. And yeah, I don't know. I have an admiration for it, and I think I'll probably end up watching a Let's Play at some point, because I would love to
Mhm.
see, like, how the game. I know I'd be losing out on the mechanical aspect, but just seeing the
Yes.
game and like and having a good enough understanding of how it feels, like, I think I would still get something out of that. But I don't see myself ever going and playing it. I do see myself playing Dark Souls 3 at some point. I would like to try
Mhm.
that out, because I really enjoyed Bloodborne, and I know that game is compared pretty heavily in terms of its
Yes.
feel.
3 feels a lot more like Bloodborne to play
So
for sure.
so yeah, I mean, if they did a Bloodborne 2 at some point, I'll
Oh.
absolutely check that out. Dark Souls 3
I
I'd like to
wish.
play. Elden Ring, maybe, even, depending what it ends up being. Like, you never know. But Sekiro, I
Mhm.
think I'm on the camp of, I respect it and I think it's cool, but probably won't ever play it
Yeah.
like
I
that.
I totally understand, and that's been what I've been saying about it too, is it's if it clicks, it's the best game ever. If it's not for you, you can't force it. So
Yeah, exactly. And that leads us to the second last question of the quiz, Kate. We have, what is your coolest video game outfit or character design?
Um, this one was tough because there's a lot of really cool characters in games. Like it's such a great space to be creative and design something.
Yeah, shout out to Miles
Um,
Morales and some of those sick suits. Like, man, those are
yeah, some of those
so
suits are
much material to
cool and
pull
like
from comics and everything. Like, looks awesome.
yes, 100%. Like I think every game we've talked about could be a contender
Persona has
for
some
this
cool ones.
question. But I ended up going with Jin from Ghost of Tsushima.
Mm-hmm.
I just think like and it just ties into, the visuals being a big part of that game, but some of the armor sets you get are so cool,
Oh,
and it's
absolutely.
it's in conjunction with that, the quests to get the armor sets are typically some of the best quests in the game I found. So I think that contributes a bit in terms of like it's really exciting to get to unlock a new one, and they're really cool. Like you, and they have gameplay considerations as well. Like some are better for exploring. You can kind of like uncover the map a little bit easier. Some are better for like melee combat. They give you some better like stats for soaking damage. Some are good for like I got one recently that is good for bow combat. Like it lets you
Mm-hmm.
like draw your
Mm-hmm.
bow a little bit quicker. And so they're just really, really neat. I think they have that perfect blend of being like really cool for like a kind of like fantasy, like really distinct and interesting outfits. And as you upgrade them, they get like new pieces. So, like one of my outfits, for example, I just upgraded and it got like a hat portion that's new that adds on to it. But they also like kind of have that really nice, like historical, like time period aspect to them as well as like a historical fiction. And so I did some looking into it and it's kind of neat. So, because I was curious to know like, well, how like accurate is Ghost of Tsushima? And so specifically about the armor sets, after I'd done some reading of people who are a little bit like even more knowledgeable about the subject, they said that if a lot of the armor sets are quite accurate. They're just not quite the right time period.
Okay.
So they took a little bit of creative liberty with that, but just even having them be like still like obviously very like based on a lot of like traditional armors and things is it's really cool to see that kind of like adapted into the game. And I just think like I don't know that like samurai like old ancient like historical like Japanese aspect just really like appeals to me.
Yeah, I'm
And
not
so
surprised to hear you say that because I mean they won so many awards for making that game so faithful to a lot of the history and like the place of Tsushima, and they were I know remember we talked about on the show about some of the developers being made honorary citizens of the island and whatnot. So I'm not surprised they did their homework on making it as accurate as possible.
yeah, and I just think they're gorgeous like some of the different like cloths that they use and I love the samurai armor where it has those like the layers of the
Hmm.
mail as it
Hmm.
goes down and like you can get some like really interesting outfits later that are a bit more like they're not necessarily combat related but you just get some like really beautiful like outfits and like I think you can even like unlock like a Mongol outfit that's got like the furs on it
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so
you can.
they're really varied and I like that they have like gameplay consideration. I like that when you upgrade them they actually do look different like they get like an extra little bit of like flash or like functionality to them and I just think like they just look so cool. I love like the only downside is like oh I want to use this one because of like the stats it gives me but like oh man the other one looks so cool so my
Yeah,
only
yeah.
complaint is like I like some of them too much that I just want to always be wearing like the bow one but like that's dumb when I'm just like in town so
Yeah, 100%. That was my only complaint with Tsushima. Really, that like in terms of the armor was just that as much as I like the look of certain ones, it's if I'm trying to do a stealth mission, I have to wear the stealth one, or when I'm roaming the
hmm
map, it's as I want to wear my cool samurai armor, but the one that shows me where the hidden stuff and the collectibles are is just so much more useful in that situation that I
yeah
wouldn't
so
wasn't
like
always able to wear the armor that I wanted. Like I wish you could in Miles Morales, you can take the abilities of one armor and wear a different one, but use the abilities of another. And I really wish they'd put that
mhm.
in Tsushima because otherwise I would have been so much more into the fashion.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of
But
like, switching it around is sort of cool depending on what you're doing, but it just sort of like you don't really want to spend that much time going in and out of the menu is the problem.
yeah, that's the problem. So for me, I put actually I thought about this one a lot because, like I said, Miles Morales, so many cool suits, like so many games have just these badass looking characters these days. But I ended up going with
Mhm.
Monster Hunter Rise as in terms of the outfits, just because there's so much
Okay.
variety in terms of the armors you can make by defeating different enemies and crafting different weapons and armors. And the thing I like so much about it is that the armors look so much like the monsters you carve them from. It's not like you take down like Rathalos, who's one of the main dragons in the game, and the armor doesn't look like some fantastical version where you end up looking like a Rathalos, and you know maybe it's a bit anime like or anything like that. Like it's not that they don't have those kind of looks to them, but they look almost like you really could in real life if these were real monsters take parts of them off and form them into this actual armor. Like you can see on some of them, like, oh, those are the claws from that monster I took, and those are now the blades on my axe, for example.
Mhm.
And it has this kind of realistic context on how the people in that place would actually carve these animals up and make the weapons from them. So I really appreciate that. And then that also just combines with the variety of animals of monsters in the game and
Kind of
just
animals,
yeah,
yeah.
they're kind of animals, but they all a lot of them have really distinct looks and features. Like there's certain ones that there's one called Baroth, and he's like a kind of like a rhino, I guess you could say, and he has heavily plated armor and like this hard outside shell. And when you make his armor, you have the same thing. Like you're heavily plated and you look like this tough like beast like he looks when you have the armor. And then there's other ones which are more light footed kind of animals, and then you have a very light design on your armor, and it's almost like you're wearing almost like regular clothes but colored by the animal's outer shell. And just the way that they're so faithful in the designs. And that's only the armor too. Like the weapons are just as unique in terms of what they look like compared to the monsters you kill also. So I
Mhm.
like the maybe the effort put into making it as realistic as they could within those armor sets. I think are really neat. And then on top of that, they all have different skills as well, like depending which, like I have a shield on my character. I use the sword and shield, and then my armor boosts my defensive stats, so I can guard bigger attacks because of the armor I'm using in combination with the shield. So I like the way it works mechanically like that, and then also just the looks. And
Yeah.
you can also transmog them and like do the color, so you can change a lot of the color, but they don't actually let you. So if the monster you killed is, say, red, for example, on its skin,
Mhm.
your armor is red, all the pieces you would have actually cut off of the monster are red, and when you go to do the color modifications, you can only change the kind of non-monster materials that you put on the armor, so like what you're wearing
Right, so, like,
underneath
the
it.
cloth or, like, whatever
Yeah, or
else
the
you put
belt,
on top.
or like buckles and stuff.
That's
Monster
awesome.
hunting.
I think that is actually, like, the definitive best answer for this question, like, that to me, like, I know there's a lot of other, like, really cool aspects of the game, but, like, creating your equipment off of the monsters is, like, always been, I think, like, the coolest selling point, and, like, why that series is so infamous
Mm-hmm.
is it's just, like, it's such an incredibly cool design, and yeah, exactly, like, being able to see, like, the parts of the monster on the outfit is like it's so cool. Like I've even been playing and I'm oh my god, am I gonna say this right? I've been playing a bit of Dauntless. I always
Oh
want to
yeah,
call it
yeah.
Duelist, but I've done it. It's
You did
Dauntless.
it.
And that's like the free to play kind of version of that game. And like, the game itself is fun enough, but it's like even still like that's the best part is after you come back from a hunt and you're like, oh shit, like what kind of armor can I make? It's like and then you
Mm-hmm.
get it and you're like, okay guys, come here, like look what armor I built and like
Yeah,
they're
there's so
wearing
many
like
moments
something
like that.
else and like that to me is like that's what stands out about that game. It's so cool.
Yeah, 100%. It's great. And so I guess that leads us to the last question of the quiz, Kate, which is, what is the biggest comfort food game you've played this year? A nice, fun, little, simple, cozy question to end us off.
Exactly. So yeah, mine's funny. I've really enjoyed Solitarica. You got me on about this game. It was actually one of the free games that Epic gave out like a long
Oh,
time
really? Was
ago.
it? I didn't know
Yeah,
about that.
that's what I've got it on is Epic Games and it's kind of like it's just this little puzzle game and it's got like some cute little trappings like you can get different like skills and abilities, but it's basically kind of like what's that like that version of solitaire? Like it's not regular solitaire. It's the one where
Oh,
like
Spider Solitaire? No, I
yeah,
don't
it's
know.
spider. I think it is spider
Is
solitaire.
it Free Cell? No, that's not like it.
No,
I don't
Freestyle's
know.
different.
I'm guessing.
It's the
I'm
one
just
where
guessing
like
card games.
you have a deck of cards and the cards are dealt towards you and they're in like 5 rows or whatever and you can only see like the last one. And so it's just a regular deck of cards, and you have your deck, and then when you pull a card off the top, you can then clear a card if it's one higher or one lower. So if you pull a
Oh,
four,
it's
you
kind of like
can,
cheat in that way, hey? When you
yeah.
think about
So if
it.
like I guess so. I'm not very familiar with a lot of these card games, to be honest. I wouldn't say I'm a big like fan of this genre, but
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
anyway, you pull a four, and then it's like, well, you can then clear a three or a five because those are the ones next in sequence. And then you take that three, and now three is your card. So you can now take a four or a two. And so you're kind of like chaining together these like lines, how many cards you can get in a row. And when you take one from the row, like it reveals the next one. So you want to try to get like a chain of however many. And then it's also got like some kind of like that's the basis of the card game, but it's got some game elements added onto it where like the cards are different colors and you get a resource of that color when you clear one. So then, like this resource will maybe like give me a shield or let me like clear a couple extra cards or like heal me and then you play against like different monsters who will like attack you or like make the cards harder to clear in some way. And so like there's a bit of like an RPG like game elements to it that just enhance it from being just a regular card game. And it's not super complicated. It's really very basic, but I don't know what it is about it. I just find it very like relaxing to play. And I typically play it when I'm like doing something else, like if I'm watching um like a TV show or like doing something in the background is kind of like 65% of my focus. And then I'm just kind of playing it on the side, like in the very corner of my desktop. And it's just a silly game. Like I don't even think it's that great. Like I don't really have tons to say about it. And I don't know why I like it so much, but I find that it's like I'll just kind of pull it up and like have it going fairly consistently, and I've logged way more hours than I feel like I should have.
It's good
But
though,
like it's just kind of a nice thing to do, and like I just kind of like have it going sometimes and like play a couple cards in the background of doing something else and like just find it very like zen and relaxing. So
It can be really
it's
addicting too when you kind
yeah,
of get the long chains going and you're like 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 7, like and kind of bouncing
yeah,
back and forth up and down the sequence of numbers, and
yeah,
the sound effects
and
kind of count up.
yeah, and into the games. Well, I don't play with the sound because I'm usually like
Oh, I see.
listening to something else. But it is like to its credit, it's got a little bit of strategy too because like the monsters will do something and they'll like kind of augment the cards in some way, and so you can use abilities to kind of get around that. So there is some strategy to it, but for the most part, it's just kind of a nice like I guess it's like it's my equivalent of like something to do. Like when like you're in class and like some people will like doodle as they listen because it
Yeah, just
helps them
play
like
World of Warcraft or something.
yeah, like I think it's my kind of like I don't play it in class, but like there's been like the other day I had a lecture I had to listen to and I kind of just like played along while I was listening and focusing on the lecture and just something about maybe I don't know if it's kind of like a way to keep my hands busy while I'm doing something on the computer. That's more of like a just a watch or a listen.
Hmm.
But I don't know, I find I just tend to open it up and just kind of kick out a few games here and there.
It's good.
So yeah, it's good. It's just a cute comfort food game.
My comfort food game is something I actually just recently picked up again, actually. But so a little while ago, probably like 6 months ago, 7 months ago, I bought Soul Calibur 6 on discount just off the PlayStation Network. And I don't know
Mhm.
why this has kind of become my comfort food game because I mean I've said before I'm not huge into fighting games, but for some reason I've got a bit of nostalgia for Soul Calibur from like 2 and 3 back in the day. And
Right.
6 has, I think I told you about it on the show, but it has a really expansive set of single player options, which I really
Right.
like. And so it's got kind of the one story mode where you create your own character and go through, which I haven't touched too much. But it also has
Mhm.
another story mode, which is kind of the timeline of Soul Calibur itself, and then underneath the main timeline, every character has their own miniature story you can play through with like 6 or 7 or 8 missions and different fights with against different people and a little story to go along with it. So I've just been having a lot of comfort recently over the past like week or two. And once a day, or maybe just before bed, I'll sit down and I'll like, okay, which character am I going to go through their story today? So I did like Nightmare the other day, and they're really short. They take probably like 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes at most to go through, and it's just like this little self-contained set of matches and a little story. Oftentimes the story is not that great, but something about just
Mhm.
going through and beating the missions with a certain character and seeing their timeline kind of go across and check off and finish that is just really comforting. And maybe it's a little bit of a completionist thing, I don't know, but having that experience with all the different characters and seeing how the characters have changed since Soul Calibur 3, because I haven't really played Soul Calibur 4 or 5 too much. So getting into 6 again is maybe it's the nostalgia coming through, but I've really found a lot of comfort in it and these little bite-sized chunks rather than playing for a long time. But it's
Mhm.
been really good, and I'm fully planning to go through and do all of the little stories, and then maybe if I like it enough, I'll continue and go to that other create a character type of mode. But it's just yeah, dipping in and out of there. Good comfort food game. I like it.
I like it. That's
It's
that's
good.
not what I would have expected as a
Oh,
comfort food game, but like
I know.
sometimes they
Yeah,
just hit you in the right way like that, and they just put you in like a state of mind, and it's just it's relaxing for whatever reason.
yeah. Well, if I was playing like online or something and getting my ass kicked by people, like it would be the exact opposite of a comfort food game. But because it's single player and it's, I mean, not overly challenging. Maybe if it's a character I'm not super good with, the last couple of matches could be kind of tough. But overall, I've been doing just fine. And yeah, it's it's a weird comfort food game, but it's maybe you need something a bit untraditional sometimes. I guess who knows. Anyway, I guess that's the quiz. Hey, that was fun. It's fun to talk about stuff like this, and I'm sure we'll end up doing. Maybe this will be like a tradition now. Every time we have another anniversary on the show, we'll have to amend some of our answers and go through the quiz again.
I
So
like it. It's kind of like a cute look back on our on the history of the show and some things we've talked about and also just looking at things in a little bit of a different light and getting some fun silly little stories out as well. So
yeah, I mean, we play so much throughout the year too, especially with PS Plus being such a big part of the show that it's nice to have
mhm.
a reason to go back and assess. Like, okay, yeah, what did I play last year? Like, I forgot I played a lot of these games on PS Plus, but then going back through and looking at that list, like, well, which of these was the best game I played on PS Plus? And kind of reliving
Mhm.
and going through your notes or going through whatever however you track it. It's a fun experience actually, nice like blast from the past kind of stuff. Really cool. But
Mhm.
Yeah. I guess that's going to close us out for the show today. Again, thank you all very much for sticking with us over the last year and hopefully the years to come as well. Again, we didn't do listener mail this episode. We were expecting a long one, so we didn't plan for it for this episode. But usually this is the time when we would answer a listener mail question. So please, if you have any video game related questions coming up, or if you want to answer one of our questions from the quiz today and send us in what you thought, let us know at circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com. You can also tweet us at CNSPod if you want to get in touch that way. We would love to hear from you, so please do get in touch if you have a question for us. But until then, Kate, we will see everyone again in 2 weeks' time on the show, where we're going to be doing some E3 predictions. So look forward to that, and we will see you again in a couple weeks. The intro and outro music for Circles and Squares was produced by friend of the show, Matthew Chan. Interlude music is from Scott Gratton of the Free Music Archive. Our channel art was created by @unreasonable on Twitter, and our brother Alex is the designer of the Circles and Squares logo. Thank you all for listening and supporting the show.